in, uh, like I'm gonna let you in the hell as well before he died on the ground. Yeah. So still ongoing the lockdown in Shanghai.
So here we go into the big tech news for today. There's your air horn. It's Friday. Did May jump in and give us a happy Friday? Did I miss that? No, she didn't.
Emma didn't show up. Yeah.
Okay, she's a no-show today. Okay, so the top story today is Bloomberg says they have sources that during Twitter deal negotiate. My God, is this Twitter acquisition just staying? It's got a lot of staying power. People are really interested in this. So during
Are
Twitter
you really sure that we are that?
During Twitter deal negotiations, Elon Musk said he would focus on the company's bottom line and floated the idea of cutting costs and jobs, according to Bloomberg. Although everyone else is reporting it too, but they're the ones who say they have sources. So I imagine all the others are referencing. Oh, there's a tweet by Jason Goldman. Jason Goldman is one of the most important, never discussed, just due to his own liking. He's very low key. He was the first product person at Twitter, like the very first, and incredibly close with the founders. And was I mean, if you hung out with the Twitter guys in the very very earliest days, you could be mistaken for thinking that Jason Goldman was like right up in there, making the whole ship sail at the very beginning. And he's the one who certainly could have had the @Jason Twitter account if he wanted it, and gave it to my buddy Jason Calacanis, and took his last name as his Twitter handle @Goldman. And he jumped on Twitter to say, there is, of course, a nuanced debate to be had about content moderation, but right now we've reset the clock about 15 years as folks fumble through the first principles approach, and that makes dunking very easy, but makes the risk of real harm very high. Interesting point. So, to the Bloomberg article, it says that Musk's Twitter pitch to investors featured job cuts. Billionaire discussed boosting cash flows, cited track record at Tesla and SpaceX as proof of his successes. As he negotiated a $44 billion deal, Elon told bankers that he would be focused on the social media company's bottom line, floated the idea of cutting costs and jobs, according to people familiar with the matter. On calls with teams of bankers before the deal was announced, Musk fielded questions on how he would generate financial returns at Twitter. While nothing is set in stone, and Musk himself had no access to Twitter's non-public financials at the time, he specifically mentioned job cuts, said the people who asked not to be identified as the details are private. He didn't go into details about which departments or positions might be affected, the people said. Musk also discussed ideas to monetize the platform and boost cash flow, including potential subscription service to drive recurring revenue. The sources said while he's said publicly about how he plans to drive growth, he suggested earlier this month that he isn't preoccupied with money. Quote, I don't care about the economics at all, Musk said at a TED conference while making his offer to buy the company. Okay.
So Tyler, employee growth at Twitter the last couple of years, I mean, has been going up, way into double digits. It was like 12% between 2020 and 2019. I think it was 25% growth the year before that, 16% the year before that. I mean, I think they've got like 7,000 something employees maybe now, 7,500. If he goes back to where they were in 2017, which is not a terrible number, he'll be about 4,000 employees. And, he's probably got a whole bunch of, content moderators he can fire because they're not going to be moderating much content.
1,500, as somebody reported. Those aren't really high-paying roles, but when you add it all up, that's there. I don't disagree with the notion that you could significantly reduce the headcount without, and you might even benefit in doing so in many regards. That's not uncommon, by the way. When you get investment banks taking over companies. So the next one is that Reuters says they have sources that Elon Musk has lined up a new CEO for Twitter and told banks about the ideas for monetizing tweets, like charging a fee for quoting or embedding tweets. Oh, that's interesting. Elon Musk told banks that he agreed to help fund the acquisition, that he could crack down on executive what? He would crack down on executive and board pay at the social media company in a push to slash costs and would develop new ways to monetize tweets. 3 people familiar with the matter said. Musk made the pitch to the lenders as he tried to secure debt for the buyout. Musk had to convince the banks that Twitter produced enough cash flow to service the debt he was looking for. In the end, he clinched $13 billion in loans secured against Twitter. And okay, there you go.
Well, it's
There
25
you
billion
go.
total. So the 13 billion is loans that are going to be, arguably on Twitter's books. And then another 12 million that's like his margin loan. But I'm sure there's going to be a structure if Twitter's successful that they're going to pay back Elon's margin loan too. But it's $25 billion in debt total in order to make this buyout. So 13 billion is the stuff that's not coming out of his margin account.
Okay.
There goes, Tyler, there goes that what we talked about earlier, that everybody, including Musk himself, was saying it has nothing to do about making money. So there you go. You were talking about how Twitter can even try to enter the Chinese market, trying to make money and stuff, which there is nothing wrong about that, but at least not, putting that out there
No,
and
no,
trying to. Okay.
yeah, no, I don't want to interrupt Messi, but even if he wants to run the company break even, so we're talking about debt, not how to make a profit. Even if he wants to run the company break even for some great social cause of free speech, in order for him to buy the company, he needs to come up with he needs to do this $25 billion of debt, and he needs to pay interest on that debt. But the interest on that debt is more money, okay, than Twitter currently generates in cash flow. So when all these cuts that we're talking about, it's not necessarily and even the discussion was not about making money or a profit as people generally determine it. It's simply having enough cash to pay your debt. So I just wanted to distinguish that.
All right, the next is from CNBC that Elon Musk has sold approximately $8.4 billion worth of Tesla shares this week. That's a whole lot of shares. Then you've got another one from The Information. They say they have sources that the FTC has opened an inquiry into whether Elon Musk complied with its reporting requirement as he acquired 9.1% of Twitter between January and April. Next big story is from Business Wire that Apple had their quarter 2 revenue report of just under $100 billion, up 9% year over year. That's a lot of growth for a company that big. Damn. I still find it hard to believe Apple can be growing 9% per year. That's wild.
Look at Google; they had even a faster growth rate, and people were like some people were upset because the growth rate slowed. I mean, it's the same thing with Amazon. It's like, yeah, the growth rate's slow, but look how big these companies are, and you're going to have a pandemic, top depending on which company we're talking about. Obviously, Amazon benefited by a lot of the lock-ins, But Amazon's down like 11-12% this morning, and we could talk about that afterwards. But yeah, I mean, yeah, all these numbers are tremendous growth for companies this large.
Yeah, but the reason I'm more impressed by Apple's, or maybe a little less impressed by Google's, because Google's software driven and Apple's hardware driven. Man,
Yeah, but Apple though had tremendous growth in services. So
yeah,
don't forget this business. Yeah.
yeah, I imagine they did. I mean, that's where on a percentage basis, that's where I imagine a lot of the growth is. But
Yeah, but also, Apple, like you said, is a hardware based company. Even though they are making the shift, they also really really try. Well, they tap into the huge Asian population that because of COVID and other things, the supply chain disruption has affected them so much. And even contrary, the software companies are actually benefiting nowadays because I think whether from the Zoom and other things, companies are actually going online, which means software services are benefiting from the COVID or supply chain disruptions. I think that might have something to do with it as well.
so Reuters is reporting that Apple's services, as we were just talking about with Ken, the services revenue grew 17%. So yeah, that is where a lot of proportionally where the growth is coming from. And then Nikkei Asia is reporting that Apple revenue in China grew only 3.5%, where globally it was, what was it, 9%. And revenue in Japan is basically flat. Revenue in the rest of Asia Pacific sank 6.7%. Wow. The
I
next is
don't think I don't think Apple's going to have a decrease in revenue until they start going into the metaverse, because that seems to be what slows down a lot of the other companies. Done.
on that note. The next one is that Snapchat CEO Evan Spiegel dismisses Facebook's metaverse ambitions as "quote unquote" ambitious and hypothetical. Ouch! Well, they claimed yesterday they have 17,000 people as part of the team now, and says the word metaverse is never uttered inside of Snapchat's offices. Well, probably because they have more of an AR focus than a VR focus, and metaverse tends to lend itself more towards a VR kind of mentality. And he says that Snapchat is committed to augmenting the real world rather than replacing it. Right, precisely the point I'm making, which is that's why they're not using the word metaverse, because metaverse implies virtual reality, not augmented reality, to an extent.
I
Snapchat.
agree. I think VR is always going to be a little bit niche, and when people are confronted with the choice of real world, virtual world, they will opt for real world, as you can see as the pandemic slows down.
So Snapchat announced something called Pixie, Pixy, a $230 hand-sized mini drone that can capture 2.7K videos and 12 megapixel photos, syncs with Snapchat, weighs 100 grams, which is relatively nothing. You can carry that in your pocket and not even know it. Available in the US and France. This is super cool. What a cool product announcement this is.
The actual product is a little ridiculous, but it is cool. It's a little pocket drone. It can only take it has battery to last only about 5 photographs, but takes your selfies to another level. It's cute.
It's really cute. Just in the past 48 hours, I've seen, and I haven't seen much of this in recent weeks or months, to be honest, but in recent days, I have seen multiple people, yesterday and today, adults. In fact, one of them was a 50-year-old woman sitting on the swing in front of my beach. She had set up a stand with her camera, and I don't know if she was live streaming herself swing on my beach, or if she was just doing a very long form video or a time lapse or whatever. But she had used a stand and used her camera of her phone to, she was clearly doing video, not just photo. Similarly, there was another guy, an older guy, easily in his 30s, doing a sunset, and it looked like he might be trying to do a time lapse of the sunset. But anyway, this idea of like, instead of using one of those ridiculous selfie sticks, that this thing is light enough and small enough you could keep it in your pocket nearly, or back pocket, or easily any bag. And instead of using a selfie stick, let this thing go and take a short little video of photos. I can imagine influencers will love this thing, because it's a lot of what the actual drones, the DJIs, get used for is, letting the thing go up and just going up a bit and capturing a little bit of video. This brings that is not really hardcore consumer behavior. That's kind of prosumer behavior to use, these DJI drones. It's a bit of a headache. It's a little bit more than your average idiot can manage. So this thing is like, idiot simple. And now everybody with 2 brain cells can have a little drone to replace their selfie sticks and get some more impressive little videos and photos. This could be, I'm curious to see how popular this will get. But 2.7K video, that's not too shabby, I gotta say, in terms of resolution. I'm curious how far away it can fly from you as the pilot, quote unquote. It says, the article says, Pixie is a mini drone that can act as a camera sidekick when you can't ask someone to take a video of you. It's yellow, it's cute, and it's available for $229. Quote, today we're taking the power and magic of the Snap camera, the spontaneity, the joy, and the freedom to new heights. No pun intended, or maybe definitely intended. A new camera to match the limitless potential of your imagination. Holy shit, is that some PR speak for you? The limitless potential of your imagination, unlocked with a plastic, Chinese-made little piece of junk. Meet Pixie, the world's friendliest flying camera. It's a pocket-sized, free-flying sidekick for adventures big and small. It's not your average drone, as there's no controller and no SD card. And it feels like the company has optimized the device so that it's easy to pick up and get started. There's a button to activate the device and the camera dial to select the flying mode. 4 pre-configured flight paths. You can tell it to float, orbit around you, or follow you as you walk or run. There, that's all anybody ever wanted right there. So brain dead simple. You just turn the little knob on the thing, hold it up, it does the pre-configured flight path, gives you back your little video, and you post that shit on Snapchat. I think kids are going to love this thing.
Can we ship 200
It's over.
to Ukraine?
Yeah, no doubt. Imagine that. Imagine you're standing there like shooting around corners, looking for Russians. Let this thing fly out.
That
I think Elon should have bought Snapchat. I think the biggest problem with Snap is that they develop these devices. I mean, we must have like 10 of their glasses. Again, the drone only works with Snap, so it uploads your photographs up to Snap. So if you want to put them on your camera roll, you have to go through some other things. And it only lasts about 5 photos. So it's a cool idea, though.
Yeah, but
I'm sure somebody will copy it.
Most Instagram stories that are swipeable are generally 5 photos or less anyways. And by the way, nearly most Instagram influencers involve having somebody take their photos. So this could really unlock a lot of people who don't have an Insta boyfriend or girlfriend or whatever it is to, really unleash their talent, for lack of a better word.
I don't disagree. I think the problem is it worked with Snap. So the same thing we found with the glasses that we bought a whole bunch of, who we thought was the neatest thing. So you upload it to Snap, then you have to download it to your camera roll, and then you can use it somewhere else. I think somebody else will probably steal the idea
Oh,
and
for
then
sure.
make it for general use.
Well,
The
I mean,
idea is
So
awesome.
I don't think
looking
that
at
this
the
is even Snapchat's idea. I think these things are all covering the streets of Shenzhen, and they figured
Uh,
out, can we make it in yellow and slap our logo on this thing? I have to assume these things are. This is the kind of stuff that you would see on, off the side streets of Shenzhen anyway. So it's. I imagine you could go to a factory in Shenzhen today. Every any social media company could get this up and flying, no pun intended, in a matter of months or weeks.
I mean, you could do this with a Holy Stone 420, which is basically the size of the palm of my hand. It's about $50. It jumps up, records it to an SD card. I know because my little infant daughter loves playing with this thing.
I saw a friend of mine. He's some kind of YouTuber thing, but he did this with an introduction of like a resort thing because he was all by himself and he used this kind of drones and he walked around and introduced the facilities inside that resort. So this is very handy and useful for this kind of jobs. Not, of course, for just like Tyler said, for Instagram or like Snapchat, you only need for no more if you're for your own selfie around 5 pictures photos is enough, but what I just said, it can be used for the professional uh, YouTubers to introduce some just like said facilities or those sightseeing side spots. That is the I think the most useful scenario for this, and it's possible that inside a crowded uh, it's not said if it's gonna uh, tag you all along because mm, in that those kind of crowd maybe it gonna lose you, and if you have several
Even
drone.
if the interest rates get to 3.8, 3.9.
Sorry.
Yeah,
Tyler,
I just
looking at
say because
looking.
inside that testing, it's not said if we have like many dozens drones in the near area, if they are gonna let jam each other.
So looking at the tech specs of this drone, it's going to two obvious things to note. It's not going to be great. It's going to be great in good light and not so good in low light, just because of the aperture of the camera and the sensor size is tiny. It's smartphone or smaller. The other thing is, in terms of its connection, you asked about range. It's not. It uses Bluetooth Low Energy and 5 GHz Wi-Fi. It's not clear if you can actually fly it on 5 GHz Wi-Fi. Let's give it the benefit of the doubt. So that's about 30 meters max range outside. So
Thank you.
yeah,
I'm reading and watching the Wall Street Journal's review of it, and it's about what I thought it would be in terms of quality and ease of use and whatnot. Not great, not bad. And there are other ones that look incredibly
On
similar to
par
it.
with the
There's one called the Air Selfie Air Neo, which is nearly identical, which is exactly what I was suggesting, which is these things were pre-existed out-of-the-box solutions that companies can rebrand, almost like your coffee mug providers, the websites where you can buy all of your office merch. You just slap your own logo on the thing. Looks pretty cool. It runs on a small battery and lasts only a few flights per charge. Can be the battery, but the battery can be swapped, so you could get extra batteries at $20 a piece. That's cool. That's cool. Anyway, yeah, the quality is so, but no doubt the future versions, the quality could get quite good quite quickly. It's not bad. I'm watching the videos of it right now, and the quality is not bad. But you're right; it's not going to work well in low light. That's for sure. Okay.
yeah, and it's got to stay. It's got to stay pretty close to you as well because of the
Yeah.
way that the Wi-Fi works. But yeah, really cool. Otherwise,
Yeah. The reviewer, who's Joanna Stern, also said that it doesn't work very well in wind. Snapchat also partners with Live Nation, which is like one of the biggest concert and events companies in the US, to launch AR experiences built into concerts and festivals, starting with the Electric Daisy Carnival in Las Vegas, which is, or you could call it the EDC. It's a massive EDM festival, dance music festival in Las Vegas at the racetrack, which I've been to myself. Snapchat's partnering with Live Nation to enhance the experience. So how is Snapchat going to bring augmented experiences to this dance festival? I'm curious to see how that works. Fans at select concerts will be able to use Snapchat's camera to launch and view AR experiences at venues. Snap says the AR experiences will be built into the experience of attending a show and will help users create memorable moments. Attendees at select festivals will be able to use AR to try on merchandise, find friends, and discover landmarks featured on festival grounds. For years, video screens have been a canvas for visual expression at concerts and festivals around the world. The company said they help artists tell their stories and bring music to life. We believe Snap's augmented reality offers artists an incredible new tool that will change the way fans experience their performances. That's true. That could get really cool, actually. So, for example, I went to this festival they're talking about in Vegas, the EDC, with Avicii as a friend, as a guest. We even flew on the Avicii Air Avicii, and Tim and Team Avicii, Ash, who I've brought into the tech news around the world many times, spent a lot of effort on the visuals that go along at these big festivals. You might even say, in some sense, the visuals are almost the primary focus, more than even the audio, even though it's a music festival. But like, what really distinguishes the sort of haves from the have-nots at these music festivals is the visuals. And the idea that instead of spending an incredible amounts of money in hardware and software and technicians to create these spectacular visuals, you could do it all inside of an AR experience. And that could get really interesting.
Yeah, I used to work for Live Nation, and I remember back when I had a whole bunch of amphitheaters and theaters that we had a team and we're in charge of sponsorships, and I mean now it could just be really incredible because a friend of mine, he invested in one of those. I don't remember the name of it, but he's bought out real estate in Disneyland, where you watch the fireworks at night and they've got that like pavilion you can stand on there and have the best view of the fireworks. So he's bought up all the AR space there so that when you're in watching the fireworks, you can watch his messages or ads that he could sell to sponsors and so forth. And I believe it's the 21st of May, that next EDM. I've never been to an EDM concert. It's not really my style, but I'm going for another reason, so I'll experience that. But yeah, I think that, the enhancement of the experience, because Live Nation's all about the experience, right? And that's how they get sponsors to work in. It's not like watching a commercial. You can actually, when I was there, it was all about getting you to experience the brand while you were there at an event. And now with these technologies, I mean,
Are you there?
Okay.
yeah, I'm sorry. I guess I was in the 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 metaverse or
Metaverse.
something. I was just saying that now with these technologies, I just think it's going to enhance the whole entertainment experience multiple times over.
Yeah, the next article actually adds additional context to this. It says that Snapchat is launching something they call Lens Cloud, a free collection of backend services to help developers build dynamic AR experiences in Snapchat, location-based, multi-user augmented reality experiences. Super cool. And no doubt there'll be people like Live Nation or their artists that perform at their festivals will now have the canvases, the tools, resources to build these experiences inside of Snapchat. So whichever platform really enables this and makes this doable uh, is likely to get some really interesting people trying some shit out. And indeed, the EDM festivals, that's a brilliant first swing of things because those artists definitely and those fans, I think that's they're nailing the right audience there. Okay.
That immediately makes me think of Fortnite. Fortnite has had a few concerts and they've done some interesting thing with visuals. So if you can add those kind of components, that might be an interesting way to merge the two. So definitely very exciting.
Okay. The next is that Airbnb says its employees can work from home or the office moving forward, and their compensation won't change if they move unless it's to a different country, as I told you, because then you're going into you could go to much cheaper places like Thailand, and then they're going to want to pay you less. Airbnb is going all in on the live anywhere, work anywhere philosophy that much of the business world has been forced to adopt. Well, this makes all the sense in the world because Airbnb has to eat their own dog food because the whole vision of this is that you could ostensibly live in Airbnbs anywhere and work. And they're even trying to promote that. Well, they can't really honestly promote that unless they're willing to do that themselves. And now they are. So, bada boom, bada bang. Good for them. The next is Amazon reports Q1 revenue up 7% year over year. Yeah. Net income and AWS revenue up 37% year over year. Jesus Christ.
So the stock is down though 12%, and I'll tell you why. I listened to the call yesterday, and so they're going to probably end up laying off some employees because they've had trouble managing what the workforce should be in the warehouse between the peaks and valleys of the
Again,
pandemic.
let's distinguish.
What?
I imagine there's not layoffs in the AWS department with 37%.
No, no. It's going to be in the warehouse.
Yeah.
And most of the the softness, the areas where the why the stock is under pressure is because of the retail segment, and also trying to control costs there. They're adding a 5% surcharge for third party sellers to help offset some of their logistics costs. I think even Google mentioned something. I mean, a lot of companies are talking about increased logistics costs. Throughout some of the reports I've seen, but but people were kind of like, it's funny, they're disappointed. If you forget about the AWS, they were disappointed in the growth in the retail part of the business, even though there was growth because it was less than expectations. So, and you've seen some of it in Google too. There was some disappointment in YouTube numbers when you get to that, and the thing that people are missing, these are very large companies, as you point out. Getting any kind of growth rate on them is amazing. Okay, and it's never going to be like consistent because that's not reasonable. Um, but the reason the stocks go down, I mean, Amazon, was trading, I don't know, 40 times earnings. So you're priced perfection. There's really nothing wrong with the company. This is kind of like normal stuff that you would expect, particularly because we're in an abnormal situation, and it's just because the valuation is so high. I mean, if it didn't have a premium valuation, the stock wouldn't be down. So I'm done speaking.
Okay. Next step. According to Bloomberg, Goldman Sachs has extended its lending service to offer cash loans using Bitcoin as collateral, signaling Wall Street is further embracing cryptocurrencies.
Ooh, that's critical. That's a great move. That shows that I think Bitcoin is taking over if people are willing to take it as collateral.
Yeah, the other news
Yeah,
yesterday.
that is huge. That is absolutely huge.
And Fidelity, of course, including in 401ks, was pretty recent. And
Yeah.
then the other news yesterday, of course, was that the second, and this has been highly anticipated by me, was that the second country to be an official user of Bitcoin with the Central African Republic came in. So if you look at the Wikipedia demographics section for Bitcoin, then yeah, you'll see the second country. And I think because of the first follower effect, I think that's a really important milestone. I expect to see that demographic section start to fill up with countries over the coming years. So or hope to, should I say? I can't be
Eh,
neutral
But
here because I own Bitcoin.
Ben, I read that. I
Um,
think I think they say they are going to regulate it, but it's not the legal tender. But they can use it for payment system, etc. But it's not the legal tender.
It is
Um,
actually
I
the
think it is, yeah.
parliament. I did tweet it yesterday. That's why I was trying to get Tyler to read it. It was very, very interesting, actually. I would be interesting to see Ben and others with crypto people. It is a really quite interesting. The Central African Republic is one of countries that barely make any kind of news. If you look at their internet penetration is like, I don't know, I think it's between like 10 and 20 or somewhere there. So it is a very, very curious move and how that is gonna just work out, because I think the parliament actually did approve it, and I think the parliament the official parliament Facebook did tweeted that they approve it to be Bitcoin as well as other, they call it cryptocurrency, that they're going to accept it as national legal tender. So like Ben said, it officially will become the second country in the world to accept it and endorsed by the government. But it is kind of curious for me because most African countries actually are going the other way. Even though the population is adapting it, especially Nigeria, they are using it to accept even salaries that when they work for international corporations, they are trying to hedge their inflation and other risk by accepting crypto, because there are enough people who would accept it as a payment as well, even though the government have made it illegal and they have come up with their own digital currency, ECD. In fact, the Nigerian is becoming the very first African country that has legally launched their own central bank backed digital currency, the ECD, and then Ghana has followed. And a lot of African countries are actually saying they want to follow the success of Nigeria launching the digital currency. So I'm just curious and would be interested to hear what Ben and other cryptocurrency people would say. Why Central African Republic is going that way while everybody else in the continent are going and try and trying their best making it illegal.
Yeah, Messi, I think you meant to say CBDC, which is central bank digital currency. And unfortunately, there's 87 countries around the world who are studying going down the path of CBDCs. And it really is, it's all about tracking and control. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, take the room down that road, but I would just say that it is a pernicious thing. It has the possibilities of being very pernicious. But I think that countries like El Salvador and the central, I always get the name wrong, in Africa, the country you just mentioned.
African Republic, yeah,
There
Central
you go.
African Republic, yeah.
Yes. What that allows them to do is um, to uncouple themselves, let's say, a conscientious decoupling of the legacy financial system. And as we know, what just happened, again, this, don't kill the messenger. This is not about endorsing what Russia did. But with the sanctions against Russia, with the SWIFT sanctions, was a message to the world and to other countries who probably think, well, could I be next? If I don't toe the line, could I be next? And this is a way to get out of that entire system through Bitcoin.
But that's exactly why I am curious and interested, because if you look at even Africa, and like I said, the Central African, the Central African Republic is a very small economy, and a country that struggles a lot and barely has any even internet penetration to make any kind of dent. But still, Africa has come up with, since 2021, the free trade agreement, and trying to come up with maybe even currency where facilitation of that type of trading between African countries would be easily facilitated with cross-border payments and stuff like that. So if the huge economies in Africa, like Nigeria or South Africa, Ghana, even Ethiopia, being the second biggest population and other things, they're not accepting this type of payment. Like I said, they are actually, like you said, the central bank, CBDC, the central bank-backed digital currencies, the ECD or ECD in Ghana or INERA in Nigeria, and even many African countries has came out the last few months saying that they actually want to go that route and try to ban cryptocurrency. If that's what other strong African economies are going, and they're not really accepting it officially, how are they going to integrate economically within the continent or globally, really,
Well,
to be honest?
you have to remember, okay, so there's a mass adoption story taking place, right? I think there's when I started, there was like 30 million people into Bitcoin. Now there's 300 million, but there are 5 billion people who have a smartphone, right? And the smartphones have, with technology, we know that there's this deflationary aspect to it. So you can get very inexpensive smartphones now. And with that internet connection, now you have access to these, optional payment systems and so forth, including Bitcoin. And so, a lot of the countries, from what I've read in Latin America and in Africa, the citizens are able to now, for the first time, have some form of banking just by the fact that, by virtue of, like, let's say Bitcoin, you have 2 billion people in the world who are either unbanked or underbanked. And they've been left out of the legacy financial system, and they can now participate. So this is a very strong driver of this. And I think it just has made it easier on its citizens. And so a country, in Africa or El Salvador, they see that there's a lot of positives. For instance, I think, Ben, you can correct me. I think there's like the remittances in going into El Salvador, for instance. If you wanted to send $100 from Canada to El Salvador, you have to pay like $12. And with Bitcoin,
Not anymore with Lightning. Yeah, exactly. Almost free.
no, well, I was going to say with Bitcoin, now it's virtually free and at the speed of light. And by doing it with, like, if you wanted to send Canadian dollars to El Salvador, it would also take like 3 days. Now with Bitcoin, you have it instantaneously. So I think those are the drivers, Messi, that's happening in Africa.
Well,
Yeah.
like I said, that would be great. I think it is very curious. I will just watch it very interestingly. Like I said, the biggest economies in Africa have completely outright banned it, and the others are also prohibiting any kind of trading. The biggest, like I said, Nigeria or Egypt or Morocco, those are the big economies, and they have outright banned it or prohibited any kind of trade. So this is very, very small country adopting this. I'm just curious how it's gonna develop. Thank you.
Okay.
So first they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, then you win. And Cheryl, you had pinned something about Panama. Just to be clear, we were talking about obviously Central African Republic. We know that Panama is not an official user, but yeah, Central African
Yeah,
Republic now is the second official currency.
yeah.
Ben, do
I
you
just
have
googled this country that Messi is talking about on World Bank. Apparently, it says they are the poorest and the most fragile country, despite their rich resources. So the government is slightly corrupted too.
Yeah, the people who need it most will start.
Yeah. This is what I'm saying, that they are not, they have a very small economy, and you barely hear anything positive out of that. I really don't want to say those things, but there are, like, most economically advanced countries in Africa does not include the Central African Republic, and they have had a lot of civil unrest and instability, as well as, like you say, the corruption and all those things. So yeah, we'll see. Maybe
Messi,
this is the way to
I,
fix
I
it.
I would
Yeah.
suggest that those bigger economies in Africa, first of all, whoever said that about the corrupt government, I don't know of any government that's not corrupt. But I would say the bigger economies in Africa, probably precisely because of corruption, don't want Bitcoin there because it doesn't behoove them. Um, I think that governments can inflate away their debts through the money printing and so forth, and it's always to the disadvantage of their citizenry. So just because an economy is large and it bans, something like Bitcoin doesn't mean it's doing the right thing. It just means that they're wrong in a bigger way.
Yeah,
Oh,
Cheryl, you could. Sorry, Messi, go ahead.
no. But go ahead, Ben, please. I have been
I was
talking too
just going to
much
say, Cheryl,
already.
you could look at it. You could try looking at it through the lens of, rather than, I think the frame you're coming from is these corrupt governments are choosing Bitcoin. Therefore, they're choosing Bitcoin because they're corrupt. It's worth also seeing what perspective you'd get on it if you looked at it through the lens of they're corrupt because they're not yet using Bitcoin. Just as another way of looking at it.
That's the point. Is
Sorry.
when El Salvador took this on, it was assumed that they're taking on Bitcoin because they are corrupt. Um, the
Yes, but you can look at it the opposite way. That they yeah, exactly.
is there is there Ben, from your perspective, do we know the average cost basis that El Salvador is in Bitcoin? Are they public about that? I
Well,
imagine
sorry, what do you mean by
their
the average cost basis? Just
their,
be
their
clear.
average cost over them, because they've purchased Bitcoin multiple times on multiple tips.
Oh, I see. Their average purchase price.
Right.
No, I don't know. I don't know what that would be. But it probably is known. I'm sure it is known because it's all public. So,
Right, but I imagine they're probably up at this point. Um,
mm, I'm not sure actually. With the recent price movements, they're probably not. I don't think they're doing great or particularly badly. It's been very much a crab sideways movement
uh-huh.
for the whole time that El Salvador's been involved. So it's been ranging in the kind of 40 to 50,000 range. So I don't know exactly what their average buy price is, but it's not going to be spectacularly up or down.
Is there a guess on who might be third? Is that I remember the Panama article that Cheryl. I think we saw one in the back channel about how Panama is contemplating at this point.
Ben, wasn't it like somewhere between Honduras, Portugal? There was rumors of Brazil, and I forget one other country. I know Mexico's put it into legislature, but I don't think that'll be the next.
Well, there's all sorts of, you can make all sorts of guesses, but I don't know how many people guessed it'd be Central African Republic that come next. I guess in the bigger picture,
Exactly.
there's a second user. That's, I think, and because of the first follower effect, which I think I've described here before, where you can put actors in a park, somebody can stand up and dance like an idiot, and that's just one idiot dancing. That was Bukele with Bitcoin in El Salvador. If you then plant another actor to stand up near them and dance to the same tune, then suddenly you're very likely then to have a movement, and that's likely to spread. Because the first follower is the critical domino. One domino falling is just that, but a domino falling and hitting another and making it fall is the beginning of proper helter, whatever you call it. Not game of dominoes, but what do you call those things? Helter skelter or whatever. I don't know what the meta name is for dominoes, but you get the idea. So yeah, I think that's the significant
But
point.
in
Is that
both
there's a second.
cases, it was the similar variable is that the prime minister or president kind of singularly was championing it and dragged everybody along. And then what that leads me to suspect is that the potentially, eventually, Bitcoin could become a campaign issue, where today it's abortion or gun rights or whatever. Eventually, you could get to a point where one candidate will be the pro Bitcoin candidate, and the other will be the the non pro Bitcoin candidate, and this will become a way that politicians will be politicians and pander to votes, and if they feel like a majority of the people are pro Bitcoin, then you're going to have pro Bitcoin candidates rather immediately.
Yeah, but interestingly, the two states that have currently taken it on have done so not at the time of an election, but in
Right,
between with the current
right,
leadership.
right.
Yeah,
But if you get half of a country being pro Bitcoin, you'll start seeing pro Bitcoin politicians running for office. And if you do get a pro Bitcoin person in a prime minister like role, that could be all. That could be what it would take. Yeah.
To me,
You already see
is
that happening with some American politicians saying they want to get paid in Bitcoin, right? So
Right.
that to me, Tyler, might be quite interesting. Even though we don't have all the African countries still having free and fair elections anyway, but a leader that genuinely wants to do those things and have the resources to put behind it might be a good thing, because George just mentioned about billions of people being unbanked, and Africa and Ethiopia, where I am, is one of like the lowest bank, the biggest unbanked population. And my worry is Bitcoin is being adopted by few people in the cities, where the noisiest and have access to everything and stuff like that. 80% of most Africans still live in the countryside, depending on agriculture and other things. And adoption by those people, I'm pretty sure, is way, way behind. And in order to have that kind of widespread adoption and popularity, as well as the benefit of it, especially $80 billion remittances comes to Africa every single year. So if 80% of the people are not able to participate in that type of thing, it does not make sense for any kind of innovation. So if a leader comes up and then say, you know what, I'm going to bring this 80% of population that have been left behind and have not benefited from any kind of economic progress or innovations, and that we're going to put the resources behind it, so they would have access to the technology, to the internet, to phones and things like that, the same way Nigeria is progressing in terms of payment processors and stuff, because of going out and bringing the unbanked to be banked and be part of the mobile money. Or the same way M-Pesa took hold in Kenya. Like 89% of the population now uses M-Pesa, even though they have absolutely no bank. So if those things can be like compellingly presented, that might be a great thing to me, and that might work.
Okay. On a related note, just jumping into one of the tweets that we're going to get into later, Telegram rolls out crypto payment via chat. Sending crypto is now as simple as sending a message through Telegram's newest feature. Make no mistake, been telling you every day it's coming to Twitter very, very soon, and the fact that this is happening here in Telegram confirms that there's going to be a bit of a race going on. WhatsApp is doing this in India, piloting it in India. They're allowed to do up to 100 million, as I understand, 100 million users at the moment. They just got allowed to do more. Telegram rolling out crypto payments. Twitter will roll out crypto payments. Mark my words. Matter of fact, if you want to bet, I will happily bet you on that.
That's actually. Oh, sorry.
Name the currencies. That would be
Oh,
a much harder one.
no, that's what Parag Agarwal was working on, I believe. That was one of the big rifts between. Okay, that was one of the big rifts between Parag and Jack Dorsey, was that he's a Bitcoin maximalist. And Parag, I don't actually know his opinions. I don't know any of us do. He was told, I think, to work on this, and he was happy doing it. He led the engineering team on it. And that was right at the time that Jack left. and this is like a lot of what apparently has to do with the backstory of Elon's discussion with the board prior to doing his offer. Um, so anyway, this is a lot of I don't know that it's personal against Parag. I think that this was a major rift between them, but they have long intended to do crypto payments, and crypto Twitter has been very strong. Like there's distinct communities in Twitter, and one of them is crypto Twitter. There is also a separate section of Bitcoin Twitter, but they overlap quite significantly. And I think, I mean, that's certainly been in the works for them to be able to do this. The question is going to be, what payments are they going to accept? So while I think what is it called, Cube, is going to be strictly Bitcoin and Lightning Network, and I think something else. I think they're building another network. But I think that the Twitter one is going to be a little bit broader, and it will probably accept other tokens. That's to my knowledge.
The hot rumor on the street is that Elon is going to go deep into Doge and then light it up on Twitter and make the price of Doge go up 5x while he's in it
Did
for billions.
Did you see yesterday? I think it came out that he has the case that's still ongoing with the SEC about his tweets on going private. I don't know
Correct.
if you saw that at all, or you saw that there was a
I'm thinking,
settlement.
I'm thinking Twitter
So the
private is
settle
the Saudi money. Yeah.
Right, exactly. So he was doing he violated a number of securities regulations in doing that, and so he offered a $20 million settlement, which of course now looks ridiculous, to the SEC to settle all the charges, and a judge formally rejected them, and so still on the table is this obligation that his lawyer will have to review all of his tweets
Right.
before he sends them, which I think is going to be, there's so much of a mess in that. I think that that's, very interesting. There's also two legal arguments as to whether or not he can actually restrict anything in Twitter. So this has been like an ongoing set of conversations. Thank you. Sure. This has been an ongoing set of conversations that we've had, which is, the idea of whether or not he's basically bought something that, because of the way that it's currently been used and the world that we live in with Section 230, he may actually not be able to do much in terms of what he gets to regulate. So I think it's all very interesting. It's a big hot mess. I'm sure you guys have talked about it quite a bit. But the latest information about the failure of this settlement is really surprising, right? Because now he's going to have to, if he, assuming that all the rest of the procedures come out so that he actually takes ownership of Twitter, it's very possible that he may not have the right to tweet himself, which I think is kind of funny.
Okay. Next up is South China Morning Post says they have sources that China's preparing to end the regulatory crackdown over their big tech companies and give the big tech sector in China a bigger role to help boost the ailing economy. A symposium involving Chinese big tech has been scheduled after the Labor Day holiday to assure business leaders on the new direction.
Hey, you want to invest in edtech? Yeah, no problem to see here. Nothing. Oh, wait, your economy's gone? What? Haha, magic. Money disappeared. So I think a lot of people are very skeptical about investing in China now, given their kind of quick moves with restricting, for example, education investments. So I don't know how you're going to appeal to investors and make them feel a little bit more secure.
The Alibaba and JD shares jump as China pledges stimulus to rescue economy is the headline from Bloomberg. And the headline from Reuters is that China to end regulatory storm over big tech. The next is from The Verge about a report finds that Amazon and third parties collect data from interactions with Alexa through Echo speakers and share it with as many as, drumroll please, 41 advertising partners. third parties are collecting data from interactions with Alexa through Amazon Echo speakers and share it with as many as 41 advertising partners. Amazon and third parties use data from smart speakers to sell you stuff, says the report. Say what? What are they doing? Is Amazon trying to sell us stuff? Are they using my data? Is it what is going on? They're using my data? Why didn't anybody tell me? A report released last week contends that Amazon uses voice data from its Echo devices to serve targeted ads on its own platforms. In other news, the sun will rise in the east and set in the west tomorrow, folks. The report, produced by researchers affiliated with the University of Washington, UC Davis, UC Irvine, Northeastern University, said that the ways Amazon does this is inconsistent with its privacy policies. I can hear the silence is deafening. You're all shocked. You are all stunned and amazed that Amazon is using data beyond the ways that it says it does in monetizing your personal data. The report titled, "Your Echoes Are Heard." How clever. Tracking, profiling, and ad targeting in the Amazon smart speaker ecosystem. The report concludes that Amazon and third parties, including advertising and tracking services, collects data from your interactions through Echo Smart speakers and shares it with as many as 41 advertising partners. That data is then used to infer user interests. How dare they? And serve targeted ads on platform as well as off platform on the web. It also, how sinister are these geniuses over there at Amazon? That they heard stuff that you said and then use that to target ads at you. Whoever could have dreamed up such a thing? Those crazy evil geniuses over there at Amazon headquarters. Somebody was in a meeting on a Wednesday and said, you know what, guys, I have a genius idea. How about we listen to what people are saying and then send them advertisements about it?
Shocking and so unexpected.
So very unexpected.
I'm actually confused as to how they're legally doing this, because that's, clearly an invasion of privacy most of the time. I mean, even the police are able to, they have to show probable cause before they can use, additional surveillance, like enhanced surveillance equipment. Is this, I don't have an Alexa. Is this something that you just agree to in like the accept cookies and accept data thing? Like, is this a term? Like, how are they legally able to to overhear your voice information and record it?
It doesn't say they're recording it. It's just they can.
I mean, how else are they using an algorithm? They have to record it somehow so
Oh, by
that
the
the
way,
algorithm can
this
process it.
is precisely what your cousins and uncles and aunts have been bringing up at Thanksgiving dinner, is it not? That they believe that the platforms are listening to their conversations because they're seeing ads for things that they didn't actually type in a search string or query for. I mean, nearly everybody's experienced that, has had that conversation waiting to get on the airplane at LaGuardia. The person sitting next to you on your JetBlue flight no doubt mentioned this to you at some point, yes?
Well, that's a key point of this, right? Which is the person who signed up and agrees versus all the background people. That's a really big point on this. But isn't this like so? So is the article basically, preloading for a class action lawsuit?
Great point.
Or
That's a great question.
I mean,
By the way, it says one of the most interesting revelations, unknown, unbeknownst bits of data in this article is that this report from UC Irvine, UC Davis, etc., concludes that this type of data is in hot demand, leading to 30 times higher ad bids from advertisers, which makes perfect sense because this is expressed interest that is previously unknown, which is certainly a very high value if you're able to tap into people's conversations. And this begs the question: how much will advertisers pay for when they can get access to your thoughts before you even speak them? I imagine the multiple on those will be very high indeed.
So
But
Tyler,
what's amazing, not amazing, amusing
Is
is,
this considered first party data? I mean, third party data is going away because it's been regulated out.
Well, hang on. So
And
the next paragraph, this is where it turns into, legalese. Amazon confirmed to The Verge, where I'm reading this from, which Cheryl pinned to the top of the room, that it does use voice data from Alexa interactions to inform relevant ads shown on Amazon and other sites where Amazon places ads. Quote, similar to what you'd experience if you made a purchase on Amazon.com or requested a song through Amazon Music. If you ask Alexa to order paper towels or to play a song on Amazon Music, the record of that purchase, that's the point, is the data of the purchase or the data of the request. In text form is what they're able to use. They don't actually need the recording of the voice, for example. But the record of the purchase or song play may inform relevant ads shown on Amazon or other sites. So that's the point, is they're not using your voice, they're using the records of your requests.
so Tyler, there's a couple of things.
okay, so that's still first party data. But if they sell that data to another publisher, a partner of theirs, like you said in the article, that's third party data, and that is now being blocked.
Okay. The company also confirmed there are targeted ads on its smart speakers. Quote, customers may receive interest-based ads when they use ad-supported premium content like music, radio, or news streams. And this is why Amazon is going to kick serious ass in the media department over the likes of Netflix and traditional radio, traditional TV, all of it, with their Amazon Prime stuff, because they're going to have microphones in your house listening to everything. They're going to be able to extract more of your future intent or current intents or future purchases or whatnot than Netflix, for example, because they
And
own all.
flash news. You can buy an Alexa for every single room in your house for $1 a piece on Craigslist as of this morning.
Is that for
Well,
real?
the
But it says that
No, that's a joke. It's a joke.
it says that that it's using your voice data. The record of the transaction is, the purchase, like the closing of the closing of the transaction. But the closing of the transaction is not actually what they're using. They're actually using something that is it looks like it's the voice data. They're recording you saying buy blah, right? But that's still recording your voice, and that's usually not permitted. That they would take the data of like the credit card information was passed and it was closed, but they wouldn't record your voice. So this still seems like it's legally a problem.
well, here's the thing.
But
So
if Amazon is a publisher, is that Alexandra? Yeah. Is if if Amazon is considered a publisher and that's your voice on an Amazon device, then that's publisher first party data, and that's legal.
well, that voice is also stored in the cloud. All right, there's configurations for you to go and change that as well. Right. So, for instance, if my daughter is in a room watching Disney, okay, it's going to start suggesting all the toys on Amazon that she could buy from Disney. Right. That's relatively the way it works. Now, the downfall of that is now I can use that same thing from a hacker perspective. I can go in, I could download your voice samples and say, I did this to Tyler. I can now become Tyler all over the internet and use his voice everywhere. And it's as simple as downloading that data and using Descript to pretend I'm Tyler everywhere.
But
Yeah,
anytime you want to record voice, don't you have to have consent and to be like, you're being recorded right now? Is that
The
okay with
con-
you?
the consent is saying Alexa, but they're still recording of everything else. Like for instance, like I said, the daughter watches Moana. All of a sudden, I'm getting emails from Amazon, from AWS to buy all of this stuff for Moana that's being sold on Amazon.
I suspect there'll be more than a few legislators who are having a little bit of heartburn about what Amazon knows about their discussions at home right now, and that
that's
this
It's
will
not just
further inspire the big tech clampdown that's underway.
that's
it's not
precisely
just
what happened with China.
Amazon.
That's why the big,
It's not.
that's why the Chinese, the CCP has been in such an tizzy about Chinese big tech, because they realize that all of these big tech companies have collected all this data, most most aptly characterized or demonstrated by their paranoia about Didi and their shutting down of the Didi IPO when they realized that they had microphones in the cars recording the rides.
Tyler, it's not just Amazon though. It's all you turn around and look at it, it's also Facebook. That's why they bought WhatsApp. The integration into WhatsApp keeps it. The only difference is WhatsApp doesn't let you go in and download those recordings, but it will make suggestions on ads based on things you've said.
Yeah, but they also have all the chat that they can analyze to the nth degree.
Correct. Correct. That's why I always purge all of mine. What's the proof it's purged? It could be like the content that they collect. It could be a 0 or 1 that just says it's displayed or not.
But it's also why they say end-to-end encryption with an asterisk, that they can receive it on the other end. Um,
This will probably never happen, but theoretically, let's say I say, hey, Alexa, and then it's listening to me, and I'm in the background talking about plans of how I'm gonna, blow up Bezos's house or Amazon or something like that. Then, I wonder if they do anything, or but they probably couldn't. But it's a weird thing if someone's talking about something illegal in the background. But yeah, they're not supposed to be listening.
Can I
Well,
ask?
no, they're allowed to intercept all communications. That's the whole point of signals intelligence, that they intercept everything. So, unless Amazon's very clever about how they encrypt it, the transmissions of those kind of recordings, I think they are being listened to. So,
What makes you
There
think
is no loss of
Microsoft isn't
data.
doing this while you're playing Xbox?
They are all doing it. Google keeps all of your emails. Microsoft, they don't ever lose a shred of that data. It's valuable to them.
But Prism, yeah, those Prism like the project by CIA, right? It's
They're
all
not.
yeah.
Yeah, they're not all sending all of your voice data, all of these assistants. When I first was choosing between Google Home, Apple Home, and Alexa, there was a marked difference in how much of your voice they actually send. Google Home, for example, so the Apple, for example, does more on device and more sending just of textual requests. Amazon, I didn't trust from the beginning. I've never had an Alexa for any period of time, because when I last looked at the traffic coming out of an Alexa, it's an alarming amount of upstream. It seems completely unnecessary. Never trusted it from the beginning. I'm kind of glad I didn't now. But you can't tar them all exactly with the same brush. You kind of can, because they're all in the same game, all trying to grab your data, as Nicholas says. But they don't necessarily. They're not all listening all the time, and they're not all sending all of your voice all the time. That's just worth pointing out. Now, they might be at any time, and to know for sure, you've got to analyze the traffic, and most people don't know how to do that. But you don't have to assume that they're all recording all the time and sending everything. But
Now you
I'm surprised at the number of people that have Alexa, because these issues were apparent from like day one. That's why I don't have it. Like WhatsApp, I only use it if I want to make like a free international phone call. And I wouldn't even buy like a new Samsung TV. I'd be very careful, because some of the smart TVs from Samsung have been known to like record things, without you knowing. So, we've been forced to use a certain amount of this high technology stuff. I
Use
wasn't doing
Gmail,
anything on
right?
Instagram before Clubhouse, because people use it for DMing. But you could survive in this world, I believe, without using Alexa. But that's my own view.
Ken, here's a different point, or a different way of looking at it. All right, so do you have a Ring doorbell? Do you have a Blink camera, also owned by Amazon?
I live
Guess
in a pretty secure place. I haven't put that in yet. No.
Right. So most security geeks will turn around and just have them internally. Okay, they won't have Blink and stuff internally. They'll have a lockdown camera system. Externally, they may use it, but guess what? Now you're picking up on all the conversations around your house. Now imagine the people not with the knowledge that we have. Put a Blink camera in there. Now they not only have voice, they have image. Okay, because all the data that's from those cameras is stored in the house. They'll see everything that's stored there. They'll see the products. They'll see everything. Say, okay, this person likes this kind of person. Okay, this is the type of furniture they have. So they like contemporary furniture. They have these type of toys, these types of TVs. Think of the amount of intelligence that is.
Tom,
Going back a few, I'm sorry.
no, I was just going to ask Tom a question. Can't you order like a security camera system from ADT and like with your own choices and just say you just want a camera and you just want to record
Yeah, but
video?
if you want DIY and but you still want the same quality of user experience as you get from Ring or Nest, then Unify is worth looking at. So Unify is local storage only. You have to provide your own hard disk, etc. But so that would be the most popular, easy to use, going to give you the same level of quality and experience you get from Nest and Ring, but without sending the data to the cloud, unless you ask it to.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
would.
and you can get edge devices nowadays that are like sufficiently low cost so that you can DIY your own system with voice or speech recognition and that sort of thing. So it might just be a few $100s premium over the commercial model, but you won't have anything connected to any sort of cloud or system that you're not okay with. So there's ways of doing that. Like Raspberry Pi would be one of the ways to do that. So very, very compelling.
Yeah, but you forget why they're out there. They're out there because of convenience. Most people like the idea they can look at this stuff remotely. The average person would not know how to set this stuff up remotely.
Yeah, well, that's why I'm recommending Unify, because they use a cloud connection service to get remote access. But I've tested; they do not stream your video from any of your cameras to their servers unless you are somewhere away from home on your iPhone requesting that. So it's the same user experience as Nest or Ring. You just log into an app and you view your cameras remotely. You don't need to be using a VPN. You don't need to be doing port forwarding. You don't need to be doing any of that stuff. But it does not send your camera data unless you are asking it to. So you
Okay,
kind of get the best of both worlds
There,
with
there,
these
there's a
guys.
business model begging for a solution right there. People who want to be able to monitor their homes, monitor it remotely, and have exclusive access to those data in the cloud. It's kind of
You,
surprising, but nobody's put that
they
infrastructure
have to.
together.
so
Oh,
look at
who is the single source you can buy that from?
Unify Protect.
Unified Protect.
Yeah,
Thank you.
UNIFI Protect. Yeah.
okay, then
Unified.
look at it and see if you can remotely view it with a program called Shodan. So Shodan basically picks up on any open source that's at any open ports that are out there. If there's camera,
There's no ports open, Tom. It's not like that. You check the architecture; it does not work like that. It works through a web service, so you cannot access it remotely unless you. Obviously, Unify could if they wanted to. There's no way. I mean, maybe they'll tell you they've architected it inside, so they can't. But I don't believe that. If they were subpoenaed, I expect them to be able to choose to stream my stuff. But in its normal mode of operation, it does not. It does not even send the data from my cameras to the cloud until I start viewing it. This is the point, and that's how it should be. It sends the data from my cameras to my hard disk. Furthermore, you know that it's not and can't because I do not have enough upstream to do that. I've got I know all my cameras together are over 280 megabits of stream. I do not have that upstream. It goes to a hard disk in my house, which is super easy to set up because I'm telling you, this is the only system I've found that is not geeky. I'm a super geek and I fucking hate geeky stuff. It's awful. You start buying some of these Chinese or crappy CCTV systems. They might work if you're really lucky, but they are just awful. The typography and the apps is awful. The user interface is awful. The downtime, all the people I know have set this stuff up. There's always a reason why the cameras weren't working when they needed them. If you want good user experience, don't mind paying a bit more upfront rather than a subscription, the zero subscription, and want high quality, then Unify is the way forward. But it's extremely expensive. Potentially, you could consider it to be extremely expensive. But if you look over a 2-3 year time horizon, it's not. So the favor I'm trying to do here is to help people not go through some crappy, awful, open sourcey bad user interfacey, geeky Chinese solutions and end up with CCTV that only half works. I won't accept that, even though I could set that up and make it work and save myself some money. I will only accept Apple quality experience, and that's what you get with Unified Protect. So, and I don't work for them or anything else. In
I
fact, I kind of hate them in some ways commercially, but they are very good.
bad interfacey. I love the adjectives that you use. It's pretty awesome.
Another key piece of this is just the emerging policy around privacy, because architecturally, edge intelligence has been around for almost 20 years. I worked at an RFID company almost 20 years ago, and this guy had created Kitchen Sink 2.0 to do supply chain edge intelligence and kind of flipped the whole architecture and kind of got that started in industrial applications. But with the smartphone and how it's emerged, Apple, that's kind of what Ben and people have been speaking to, which is with a smart enough device locally in your hand, you can process a lot of stuff, and it really helps companies like Apple with enough hardware in your hand or at the edge. It helps them have a more privacy-oriented or more consumer-friendly and respectful privacy-oriented architecture. I think everybody probably remembers how Vizio and a whole slew of Chinese-made video cameras, what was that, 5 to 10 years ago, were kind of busted for doing like surveillance or allowing ease of surveillance. So I mean, that's something. Just advice, just generally, is you get what you pay for, and when you're trying to go on the cheap, everything you do, what you look like, everything you do is basically easily provided to a whole bunch of people. And so I mean, I guess on the just on the last closing thing, Ben, you're so spot on about you got to put a little bit more effort and a little bit more money into it. But if privacy, if DC can get their head on straight and really start to move, this is going to have a big impact on companies like Amazon and a whole slew of other companies that don't have enough horsepower at the edge of the network, in your hand.
Hey, Ben, could you send the link to that company to Cheryl so she can post it? I can't find the link.
Yeah, I'll do that. No problem. I'll do that. I'll do that in a
Thank you.
second now. So this is a bigger issue about globalization. If you so take you want to have control of your own energy, water, and food, right? So you think about the scenario. So what do? You put a small solar panel in the garden to water your flowers, and then another one to pump your water from your well. And then you think, actually, fuck it, it'd be better if we just had one big solar panel array because that's more efficient. It's half the cost if you have a big one. And send cables to your pump and you're watering your flowers and your well, and then you go, well, actually, if me and my neighbor joined up, then we could share our solar panels, and when he's lacking power and batteries, I can give him some power, and you keep going to the community, to the country, and then to the globe, right? So in one direction, you've got this pressure to globalize and to not have anything yourself and to have no redundancy or slack in the system, for everything to be just in time, and then the power company come along and shut your power off, and you realize how screwed you are. Or Putin, invades a country, and we realize how screwed we are from an oil point of view. So this bit about edge that David's talking about, pushing the fine balance of pushing some functionality to the edge so that you've got your own independence, I think is vital, because I don't think you can be interdependent until you have learned to be independent. So what I'm saying is, where you can understand about your own power, water, food, data, take control of it, and then decide when you participate in the global community and how. And I don't think you can do that until you can take control of it yourself. I don't think one realizes just how dependent we are on how many different moving parts when we just buy the simplest of things from Amazon. The actual thousands of people and thousands of miles of travel that are involved in the buying of the simplest widget. And how hard that is if you try and do it from first principles up. So I think there is an opportunity to be more interdependent, not independent, like, where the kind of level of thinking Russia's at the moment, keep it all for ourselves, fight off anybody else. No, interdependent, but you need to go, I think, through at least the mentality of independence to do it. And this goes for your data as well. So that's why Unify embodies that quite well, because you have your own data, you store it yourself, you can use the cloud, you can leverage the global internet infrastructure to access your own cameras remotely, one at a time, or if you want to, but you also are independent. So I just think there's a way of thinking like that for many things, not just cameras or whatever we're talking about now. But I think it's much bigger than that. And if we get stuck at if we get stuck at dependence, which is level 0 or level 1, whatever you want to call it, then we're in trouble because we suddenly realize, shit, we're dependent on Russian gas, we're dependent on somebody else's data or infrastructure systems, on whatever. And if we get stuck at independence, level 2, then we're in trouble because we're misers and we're trying to keep everything for ourselves and it's inefficient and we're not helping other people and we could do much better if we're part of a global community. But if we can get to interdependence, level 3, then I think then we're making real progress. So I'm sure a lot of people in this room are like that, but Putin hasn't learnt it yet and he's the richest guy in the world, so putting the boundaries.
And if you're like Elon, you're like, yo, I'm going to be independent on my own planet.
Yeah, it's just short of that. Before we get to that dreamy, potential future, there is. I would simply add to that, and Ben, you've spoken to this a lot. Is the globalization is kind of dead, right? There's a whole a real serious decoupling that's occurring, and awareness to do that. So like the rise of regionalization and regenerative solutions, right? Because that's another really key thing. That's starting to get finally more traction as well. So, yeah, what we go clear around the world for is going to be very different in the latter years of even this decade.
There was some interesting stuff. I think some person it's a year or two ago that I was listening to. She tried to do couple to a lot of all these things that we are talking about, and she's realizing that life was almost impossible because I think we are really like most of the services that are on offer, especially by technology, is really interdependent, and that if you even not agree on some of the things they offer, whether it is like, oh, I want to have your location or this or that, how much of the functionality they actually restrict and things like that. So we willingly do that, but she really consciously tried to do that, and then she said that even doing her work became impossible. So I think even me personally, I try to say this and not agree in this and that, especially after the Facebook, what is that? The Facebook debacle of that data being given with the British company, I forgot the name, that I try to not agree with a lot of the things the big tech does, and I couldn't get a lot of the functionality for my work for my startup that I'm doing. So it's almost impossible sometimes.
Okay.
The impossible just takes a little bit longer.
The next article is, where did it go? We did the Amazon speakers. So the next one is that Palmer Luckey, who was the founder of Oculus, that sold to Facebook. Now he's doing a national security startup, for lack of a better word. AI powered defense technology, I think is what they call it. So Palmer Luckey's new AI powered defense tech startup called Anduril is raising a $500 million to $1 billion round at a $7 billion valuation, up from $4.6 billion about a year ago. And I tried.
Wow. Good. Well, I would say one of the luckiest people that I've ever heard of. A high school kid meets John Carmack on a forum, and John Carmack's like, "Hey, send me that headset," and the kid actually ships it to him. And a few years later, he's doing this. So quite successful, quite an amazing story. A few occasions he put his foot in his mouth, so he paid for that as well. So interesting to see how this turns out.
Not only that, I think it's a bit of penance, right? I mean, seeing who he sold Oculus to and how it's being used to kind of flip flop and kind of like, no, let's kind of secure ourselves. As we're flying off a digital cliff of assault on privacy.
I tried to participate in his last fundraising round a year ago, which I was not successful in doing. But he's basically able to. He has new tech that governments can use at borders which greatly reduced the cost of securing their borders. And I was even trying to get Thailand uh, to the table because Thailand itself is calling for solutions to economically secure its own borders during COVID because we had people coming over from Myanmar.
Is there any details that you can share with us about the specifics about the technology? Because it's very vague or general at this moment. So, other than, I guess, going deeper in on the article, do you have any brief description, Tyler?
My brief description would be he's using specialized drones for the tasks of border monitoring, um, so that the border patrol on the southern border of Mexico can fly drones rather consistently and have a much bigger heads up when to expect and to what degree to expect people to be attempting to cross the border.
Wow, that's awesome. That's like a Snapchat of borders.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because when you look at security, whether it be cyber or physical, it's great to monitor, but what's the action plan? Okay, because that's where it all falls apart. You can monitor all you want, unless there's an action plan to do something. It's wasted money.
Yeah, like the border patrol is a tough job. Like if you watch New Zealand border patrol, you can bring in a joint, but you can't bring in an apple. And then in Mexico, it's like yeah, people are crossing the border, quite literally like a little set of villagers, and then you have the cavalry show up, and they basically end up wasting all of these resources. So I think a lot of the cost is incurred on the response. So how do you reduce the cost of the response? There'd have to be some sort of deterrent. So I would also wonder if there's any sort of way to implement that sort of automation into the aerial system itself.
Sure, you create massive noisemakers that scare the hell out of them that fly over and make them turn around and run back.
Welcome to America. Your access has been denied.
Deter, detect, defend.
Make it sound like the Terminator, like they're about to get shot.
Oh yeah, it's like
John
the 70s Vietnam, the flying helicopters with the music. Yeah, let's just recreate that.
This is Ed 209. Lay down your weapons. You have 20 seconds to comply. Robocop.
Correction, you have 10 seconds to comply.
And so all the way down to...
The There's an article about
Does
hold
just a
on,
quick question. Does anybody know how high drones can fly?
I mean technically
So,
Legal?
yes. What kind of drones?
yeah, so
You
many
talking about
types of.
just? Do you mean consumer drones, or do you mean U.S.
No,
military
I mean
research
military
drones?
drones.
Oh, well,
Like this
okay.
kind of
That's
like what this would do, like military drones, or one suitable for military use.
Like
it's not a.
Palmer's borders drones, I'm not sure if those would be
About,
commercial drones or not.
Yeah, is a
I think
SpaceX
it's about,
is an unmanned space capsule a drone? I mean, as high as you like.
The answer I googled is the highest altitude drone ever.
Swedish.
It's 33,000 feet. It's around 10 kilometers.
That's
10,000.
Yeah, but
military drones. Commercial drones are a lot lower. I think the FAA, if you have a Part 107, I think it's like 400 feet.
yeah, that's the case in the UK. Yeah, and I think that may be fairly international. 400 feet is the limit for unmanned drones.
Unless
Regulatory, but not technical capability, right?
Oh no,
Yeah, this is what we
technically they can.
meant. Yeah,
So
sorry.
technically, whatever we just googled is rubbish because technically they can fly higher than a. There's no reason an unmanned drone can't fly higher than a. I mean, so a passenger aircraft will fly
Like
between
an
30 and
aircraft.
40 odd thousand feet, depending on where it is in its flight. It gets higher the further through the flight because as you drop fuel, then you can fly higher. You should fly higher. So
Yeah, the
there's no
drone
reason a
the drone they
drone can't
created
fly
for
higher.
Mars.
Yeah,
The drone they
and
created for Mars
well,
can
exactly.
fly in very
Yes,
yeah.
the drone exactly. The drone that went to Mars is the drone that flew the highest. Exactly.
What if I put a
So
highly
the
trained mouse in a little cockpit in a drone? Would that change the regulation? If it was highly trained And I
A dr-
strategically put cheese and had little flashing lights inside and actually trained the mouse to steer or something.
You
and
just
it's
need the brain
classified
cells.
as
You
a
don't need the whole mouse.
spacecraft. Why would you risk a mouse that's smart, honestly, on a drone? Like that mouse could die, and that would
A
be the end of the world
legion of
because that's like
smart
the smartest.
mice.
But
A legion of smart mice.
that's scarier.
Mouse
But
robot. Mouse robot.
the issue is if they're not flying high enough if the drones are not flying high enough, then their border activity has to be limited within the borders. Like they'd have to make sure that they stayed on a border, like within the country of jurisdiction. They couldn't cross over. So I think they might have some limitations in use unless, they do low level border activity and then shift immediately to satellites or something like that. But there's a lot of international regulation dealing with airspace and the free use of airspace and where that starts and ends. And so I think if you had a border conflict, that would be a real issue. Like you could have a drone that, because there's not clear borders in space, all right, like or in the air, if it actually flew into a neighboring territory that was at war, that could actually be, or like there's conflict, it's tense or whatever, it can be considered an act of aggression, as it more so than a commercial flight flying into airspace that isn't permitted.
That's why special operations guys are using drones the size of a dragonfly.
Yeah, exactly. Like
Yeah, so
there's
the,
the
Still
DARPA
an act
hummingbird.
of aggression, though. Yeah, still an act of aggression if they're caught. That's the issue.
You can't tell the difference between a bumblebee and some of these drones in terms of radar signatures. So in terms of getting caught, unless you spoof the system, which Iran has done on a few occasions with American drones, I think the border patrol here, from what I understand, reading up on this a little bit, it's kind of like a patchwork. So in the same way that um, Elon Musk's Starlink satellites are patchworks of crossing satellites. Here, the same thing. You'd have like this endless run, and so you'd have time for some of the drones to charge and so on. It's a very interesting solution. Good for Palmer Luckey. All the best to him.
So the in terms of sovereign nations and airspace, there's no, as far as I understand, there's no international agreement about how where a country's sovereign nation cease to exist when you go up vertically. There is something called the Kármán line, which is defined as 100 kilometers. That's 330-ish, well, 330-ish thousand feet in the air. Beyond that height, there's not really any argument that you're in space. I think that would be a consensus. But if you're anything below 100 kilometers or 300,000 feet, 10 times higher than a passenger jet flies, then I think you're getting into slightly murky waters as to whether you are over a country or in space.
Okay, we're going to move on. The next is global smartphone shipments fell 11% year over year. Samsung led the market with a 24% share of global smartphones, a 5-year high, and Apple had 18%. But we are clearly at the end of the smartphone era.
Well, I think the value proposition of the value of the upgrade is what we're kind of getting to the end, and that's good for the planet. I mean, quite frankly, we need
Yeah.
a few more things like supporting old ass phones and people kind of like putting the apps down and things like that. But that's green news. Thanks, Tyler.
Next is Robinhood did their quarterly earnings report. Revenue down 43% year over year. A loss of $392 million. And monthly active users down 17.7 million year over year. Oh, sorry. They're down to 15.9 from 17.7 in terms of monthly active users. So the stock has dropped another 10%. They're having a really rough year. Donald Trump posted a message on Truth Social for the first time since it launched 2 months ago saying, "I'm back." And
And then Elon trolled him, calling Truth Social, hey, you should rename it Trumpet.
yeah, China's Vision
You left out. You also said Kofefi.
China's Vision Nav Robotics, which makes autonomous forklifts and other logistics robots, raises 76 million. And according to the New York Times, China's lockdown outrage tests state propaganda limits in Shanghai, where internet-savvy residents overwhelmed censors' abilities to keep up with critical posts. Okay, there you go. Those are your big boring headlines for today. So now we can turn to the tweets as we do. Here we go. So the first tweet that I have is from Ted Abramson that U.S. electric car sales jumped to an impressive record high last quarter. Electric car sales are hitting new record highs in the U.S., but it is still dependent on Tesla and California. Next is from Evan that an MIT researchers have developed a portable desalination unit weighing less than 10 kilograms that can remove particles and salts to generate drinking water. I'll get one of those. Austin Rancher offers Elon Musk 100 free acres of land to relocate Twitter HQ to Austin, Texas.
The great migration has begun.
Could you pin that desalinization link, Tyler?
I should have retweeted it. Let's just double, triple confirm that I did. Yes, I just retweeted it to the Tech News Twitter account at TNATW. It's from Evan.
Thanks.
Yep. Next is Katerina. Micronutrients show benefit for children with ADHD and emotional dysregularities. Children with ADHD and emotional regulation disorders who consumed a micronutrient formula made of essential minerals and vitamins were 3 times more likely to do what? Good clickbait. Were 3 times more likely to show improvements in symptoms compared to those who did not consume the formula. The micronutrient formula, consisting of all known vitamins and essential minerals, was administered for 8 weeks. Quote, supplementing with all known vitamins and essential minerals at doses between the recommended daily allowance and the upper tolerable limit may improve mood and concentration in children with ADHD and emotional dysregulation.
That's awesome. My nephew specifically was born prematurely and had, enzymes and other things given to him from genetically engineered pigs, and that improved his outcomes from, hey, he might not survive, to, hey, look, he's doing great. So the fact that we're catching up to the complexity of nutrition, I think it's something that's often underlooked, especially with lower income families that struggle in some of these food deserts and so on in the busy days of, the rat race of everyday life. So it's interesting to see that we can potentially solve this problem with some sort of additional supplement or something. Perhaps even the governments could subsidize this. So then we would kind of raise the floor for a generation of children, which would be amazing.
That introduces another kind of interesting idea, and if anybody can speak to this, John or whoever, if it's that, I won't say that easy, but if it's something like diet can kind of really help, reduce the effects of ADHD, then how much of our current diet is exasperating a lighter weight case of ADHD? If nutrition is kind of a good lever to kind of go back and forth, or at least to go in at least one direction based on that report.
Yeah, perhaps how much of the population is suffering from that? That's a good question. Not only the children, but perhaps most of us are not getting the ideal nutritional uptake. Personally, I like the quote from the captain from Brooklyn Nine-Nine. He's like, I don't mind drinking a flavorless, colorless substance that provides all the nutrition to the human animal. And so, on that note, I would say. Some of these meal replacements and other things are a good way to make sure that you're getting well rounded with your nutritional uptake.
Well, a
Eric,
whole
I would
bunch of
love to. I would love to have loved Huel, Huel, which is an example of one of these meal replacement things. was so excited when I saw that, and my friend started eating it as like a meal replacement, just for one meal, middle of the day. But it just tastes like a cat's ass. So it's really, yeah. I wish somebody had made one that tastes good. If you find one,
Like
let me know.
a
Yeah,
Persian
Soylent
cat or
isn't
like
too bad.
a Siamese cat.
Why isn't nobody talking about Charlie and the Chocolate Factory and
Does the
the bazooka lady?
everlasting
Eh,
jawbreaker while we're
Yes,
have
yes.
does anybody remember Soylent? I know that pretty much everybody that started that company that was supposed to be this like all of your nutritional requirements that was originally done for jurisdiction like for areas that
Soylent Green.
Yeah, yeah, no,
no,
I,
not
I think
Soylent Green.
Soylent.
Soylent Green is people. No, no, Soylent was this company that
Haze.
it, like 8 years ago or so, I want to
Yeah,
say,
they
like
made a
when
mix.
but then yeah they but then I know everybody is doing something else. Everybody from that team is doing something else. Do you know if it's did
It's
anybody
still around.
have
Yeah,
it or is it
yeah, yeah. I get it actually every month. It's my preferred meal replacement ever since my cancer surgery, which made kind of keeping up with nutrition a little bit of a bitch. So having tried Ensure and a few of these other ones, Huel or I couldn't get that one here in Canada, even though it's made here in Canada, which is extra frustrating. Thanks regulatory framework of Canada. But Soylent is not too bad. There's two flavors that I go with, chocolate or plain. And the plain kind of has the Captain Holt flavor of colorless, tasteless, gray goop.
That was in that whole era where everybody was hacking diets. I mean, Soylent got a lot of venture capital, and I'm surprised it's still around. But obviously, they must have figured out a way to make money without going public. But there was a couple
I
other
think
ones too. There was one that sold a device that you could buy, and they would send you this packet. It was a whole scam because ultimately the guy ended up being a fraudster. The guy who developed it, I don't remember the name of it.
I
well
recently
there
I've
was
been
that
eating it.
there was that guy who did that. They did the. There were a bunch of things that came out around the same time that dried up all that funding, which was like, there was that mayonnaise one that was like dairy free, but and everybody was buying it. Or I mean, it got a lot of funding, and then it turned out that most of the sales numbers that they were posting were ones that the company itself was buying to make it look like sales were picking up. So people internal to the company were buying all of this mayonnaise thing. And then there was another one that was this juice presser that was supposed to get like extract all of this juice out, and it had these bags and it had an expensive
That's the
presser.
one.
And then yeah, and then someone showed that you can just cut it open and drink it, and the presser was not useful at all. And yeah, that was one that just everything started drying up until the meat replacement started.
So since Tyler reminded me of the benefits of green smoothies, Tyler, I remember you saying it gives you energy, but also makes you less likely to get the munchies for crap. Um, my awesome, simple, no BS solution with no proprietary brands is coconut water in the fridge and pre-made little packets of like green smoothie shit, which is like, I don't know what it is, spinach and mango and whatever you like. But you can get that that's frozen in a portion-sized packet, and then you can also get blenders that where the actual, the problem with blenders is cleaning the bastards. But you've probably seen these little blenders that you put the stuff, the frozen stuff, in the. I mean, I don't cook, right? I haven't cooked for 20 years, so to me this is cooking. But you put the frozen shit in this I don't know, what do you call it, flasky thing. You pour the coconut milk water on until it's full, and then you put the blender the top of the bottle is the blender blade. You turn the puppy upside down and put it on the blender for 2 seconds, and then you drink it straight out of the bottle. So there's no like making anything dirty. All you've got to clean is
Man,
the
those are
little
rampant. Those are all over. It's a
they're
NutriBullet or any
awesome.
of that type of
Yeah,
thing. They're
yeah.
great. Yeah, I mean, I have it too.
Exactly.
We
So
use it
there's
for smoothies.
no proprietary brands. Exactly. Just a kind of one of those, and just some frozen shit and some coconut or whatever you like, almond.
Well,
Super
hopefully
easy.
Yeah, you
frozen
can do,
shit.
but I want to go back to the study as well. The study on the ADHD. There have been studies on that because our population is severely. Well, one, there's the obesity issue, and two, there's the nourishment issue because although we take in calories, we don't take in healthy ones, and there are studies around that. So I'm glad that um, uh,
now I'm blanking on names, put that up, but it's because ADHD is not, there's a lot of factors to it, and there have been studies showing it's both, there's food. I mean, if you think about all the hefty sugars in our diets and processed foods, it's highly contributed to by that. It's environment, including all of these devices. These are enhancing ADHD, right? I mean, if you want to talk about the way kids and our next generations are going towards things. I mean, TikTok is, a prime example, but our the attention deficit is actually, way on the rise. So the micronutrient stuff, I think they've gotten to that for a lot of shown uses various micronutrients in other ailments as well. So it's definitely something to keep your eye on. And microbiome, sorry, microbiome we've talked about a lot, and how that impacts your mental and physical health.
And
So.
exercise, of course.
Yeah, and exercise is a huge one. And actually, for ADHD, when I coached mountain biking, because of the focus that's required to do technical mountain biking, it was actually a great sport for kids with ADHD.
Yeah, if you talk to you know grade school teachers who have been teaching for a long time, they'll all tell you that this is a new phenomenon at scale. And so, what the contributing factors are is really hard to tease apart. Diet, exercise, microbiome, micronutrients, screen time, screen addiction, two working parents. The list is long. I just scanned the micronutrient study that was pinned, and it was
Adult
triple blinded.
as
It
well.
was triple blinded, meaning that the researchers, the parents, and the kids didn't know what they were getting. That's pretty impressive. The results are impressive and warrant further study, but I don't think micronutrients in the diet can account for the epidemic of ADHD. I think it's a lot more complex than that. Um, and we've abandoned so much of our genetic heritage in terms of diet and exercise, and now microbiome is a knock-on effect that it's going to be more complicated than just taking a pill in the morning.
No, totally agree, John. It's very complex and as you say, multi-factor. But diet and a healthy diet is something that's severely lacking and causing, again, back to the microbiome or nutrients that people don't have, as you're saying, and then environment, what's going on, attention spans, devices, lack of exercise. I mean, it's, exactly as you're saying.
And don't forget the food marketing is one of the underlying problems here, and the assault on rational food labeling. I mean, if you've been into this whole, following a bunch of this quantified health things and just the role of food, food labeling. I wouldn't call it politics, just I'd use another word actually, but the fact we don't get good, clear information on the labels. The lobby has way too damn much power on that.
Oh, when I came to the States, it's so hard to get good information and so hard to avoid corn syrup and stuff like that is awful. A couple of quick delusions I tell myself as a 45-year-old clinging on to the idea of a six-pack, which are just stories I tell myself. One is, but I find quite funny. One is that any food that you leave out that bugs don't want, you probably don't want. So when I see a piece of Christmas cake that's been there for 6 months and it's still edible, you've got to wonder whether you should be eating that shit. And then the other thing, another story I tell myself is that if you're still hungry, your body's still looking for nutrients. Now, this isn't medically correct, but it leads to quite interesting behaviors, which is that if I reach for stuff that's got nutrients in it first and then give it a while and then come back later, I often don't need the biscuits, cake, whatever other shit. So it's probably not of any medical grounding whatsoever, but it does lead to interesting behaviors, which is that I eat nutritious
I
stuff first.
I agree. And here in Sweden and the Nordics, where we are lucky because everything is labeled into the very minute detail, we say that if it contains things you can't pronounce, don't eat it.
Yeah, we
Well, if
also
it's in
say here,
Swedish, then we can't pronounce any.
yeah, we try to stay away from things that have, obviously, like if you can't pronounce it and beyond X, like try to stay, but it's almost challenging 3 ingredients. And Ben, was that a humble brag?
No, it was. So there's this substance
I'm
called
teasing you about
di.
the six
The,
pack.
the
That was brilliant. That was just
And don't
brilliant.
Totally
So my
achievable
mum
at every age.
sent
Absolutely.
around this thing about this substance called dihydrogen oxide. I don't know if you guys have heard about it, but it's terrible. All these athletes, these top athletes, are absolutely addicted to dihydrogen oxide. Apparently, if they
Wait,
go more than a couple of days without it, they die. You need
wait,
to
is
look
that
into that. That's
3 days.
just it's
That is
Water.
Ben. That is a
apparently
well
3 days.
researched phenomenon. That's a well researched phenomenon, and Ben is absolutely correct.
in
Did
what?
you
Wait,
Oh,
what
thank
wait?
you
is
for
Did
the
it,
you?
medical back.
John?
It's
What
a
is it?
it's a disgusting scam. It's
It's
called
a
dihydrogen oxide. Everybody needs it. They
It's
have to use
water.
this shit.
It's water.
Oh, water.
Have you
Hilarious.
wait? Have you guys seen there were like a couple of years ago there were, and I saw it everywhere then, where they were like water with extra oxygen. I was like, how the hell do they do that? That would be H2O2, right? That's hydrogen
That
peroxide.
if that shit could exist, it would be highly radioactive. Yeah, that's not good. But yeah,
okay.
but sometimes
Hey,
shit can be
Another.
while we're on
Tyler's
water, can
reeling
I
in the cats.
while we're on water, can I mention a really fascinating factoid, and that is that our sense of vision and sight are very much based upon um, interpreting waves, and it's been thought forever that uh, smell is determined by a lock and key fit of a chemical with a receptor, and that's been disproven. And the way that it was disproven is just brilliant. They they took two molecules, one that is the essence of taste in almonds or in smell, and the other being cyanide. They both operate on exactly the same receptor and they smell exactly the same, and yet the molecules are profoundly different. And the hypothesis was that this is quantum sensing rather than traditional chemistry confirmation lock and key fit. And what they did is they created the small molecule, which is cyanide, using deuterium, which is as an input to it, which adds a neutron, which doesn't affect the conformation, but it absolutely affects the waves generated by the vibration of that bond. And so they showed that by substituting deuterium for regular hydrogen, that the an animal could distinguish between those two smells, indicating that it was indeed the same kind of quantum wave sensing that occurs in smell that is used by our other senses. So I just learned about that a couple of days ago. It is absolutely a fascinating experimental model where they prove the quantum role in smell.
Kinetic. So, are you saying that there's a quant? So I'm wondering if there's a means to if you're improving your sensing with your olfactory, is there a way to improve your vision? Is that possible as well?
Enter the world.
It's a totally different physical biological system. So I would have to say that would be quite a stretch, because the lock and key is still relevant to approximating the sensor with the chemical, but then it's the resonance of the chemical bond, the harmonics that allow the specific identity of the substance. So I don't know of an analog to that in either vision or hearing.
John, just hang on a sec. Does this include, has this taken account of the optical asymmetry? So now that's a very horribly complex word, but molecules of exactly the same, I don't know, dihydrogen oxide can be listed. They can be the same structure, but they can be left or right-handed. Yeah, and then that will
Yeah,
change the lock and key.
chirality. Yeah,
Chirality is the other
yeah,
way of saying. Have they
chirality.
ruled out? Yeah. So
Yeah,
you sure this chirality is not the simpler answer to that?
yeah. The cyanide molecule is, I'll have to go back and look at it, but I don't think it's a chiral molecule. I'll take a look at it.
And
I
I
would have
believe
thought those
that's
two were.
sorry. Did that study involve a rat? Because I recall there being a study like that where they would put the two different substances on ends of a maze, and the rat was able to choose or distinguish between the two. So I'm curious if it's a follow up on that study or the same
I
study.
think it was I think it was bees, but I'd have to validate that.
Oh, okay. Okay, so that's interesting. So that's another study because I'm familiar with the one with the rat. So it's interesting to see how the world of quantum biology is actually coming around because I think there's a lot more complexity to just the interactions that we see at the chemical level, and the question of whether the brain processes some quantum information is a really exciting idea because one, it kind of gives us a little bit more stuff to work on with machine learning, but also shows that there's a little bit more to consciousness than just classical chemistry. So quite fascinating.
It's incredibly counterintuitive, but very highly validated. Yeah.
Can I make a? It's not much of a suggestion for anybody in the room, but just conceptually, can we give names to these experimental rats and monkeys, and give them honor for unlocking things that really help us? I mean that partly tongue in cheek,
I
but
actually agree with David on that one. We need to honor these animals that are actually doing such great work as well for us.
Yeah, and I actually had the opportunity to ask a researcher recently who does work in neuroscience and does these studies on these poor mice, and I asked him, like, how much does it fuck with you that you're, killing these animals? He's like, on a daily basis. So it's not something that the researchers themselves are, not keeping in mind, but it is a nice gesture for the rest of us. And it's not just one mouse; it's hundreds or thousands for any one of these studies. So quite the sacrifice, but we thank them for their sacrifice, I guess.
Okay.
And someone's not going to mint an NFT over them? Come on, mint an NFT.
yeah, totally. No, a whole VR kind of, kind of a whole place you could go and pay your respects and let them go play in their afterlife in some kind of
In the
a
metaverse, David, in the
yeah,
metaverse,
yeah.
for sure.
I mean, just to build awareness of it, or just I don't know.
I'm
Okay.
sure there'll be a use case for bringing back your pets, your favorite pets.
Right.
I mean, we
So
can name crypto coins after him. Come on.
Pat found an article from Forbes with the headline "How TikTok Live Became a Strip Club Full of 15-year-olds" that I just am retweeting. Let me find Pat's tweet
That's a
here.
really good title. That probably got a lot of people clicking on that one.
Just retweeting that one. Thank you for that one, Pat. And the next is from PT Yoder. It says, "Meet Freshy's new virtual cashier who works from Nicaragua for $3.75 an hour. Union leaders are disgusted as restaurant chain Freshie develops labor optimization programs that outsource jobs to countries that pay less." So now when you come to the order counter at Freshie to order your meal, you're basically having a Zoom call with somebody from Nicaragua making $3.75 an hour.
There's something like
That's not new.
there's something
Yeah.
like vaguely appalling about being able to outsource so many of these jobs that are, the low wage jobs that like I mean I understand from the business sense that it is makes economic sense to do it, but the ability to basically use like humans like commodities and basically just go with the lowest cost in your supply chain and in order to maximize your profits and then ignore the resource, even though the money you gain is based in part on this drive to make sure employment happens. What are we going to be doing with the people who are not destined for a career in tech or one of the, the knowledge worker positions? Like, not everyone is designed for that. So what are our thoughts then on what we're supposed to do here if we're basically going to try and minimize through automation or outsource through these kinds of things? What are we supposed to do with the huge amount of people who then are completely disenfranchised from the ability to gain capital? I mean, are we just going to do universal basic income and call it a day, or what's going to happen here?
We've been out.
It's
I mean,
already happening.
stressing this. We've been outsourcing support, Facebook moderators, huge amounts of labor to these, to different countries where it's more profitable for decades. And this one is just a little bit more probably in front of the consumer's face versus calling a support line or having, a lot of our electronics built in these countries. It's going to get interesting as you alluded, the automation piece, that when you're automating, if there's still a human control element, Is that going to be done by someone who is in, more local, or someone who's lower wage somewhere else? Because it's not going to be immediate automation. There's going to be that overlap. So I think that's another interesting layer. But we've been doing this for decades on scale. There's also a lot of movement to bring things back right now, but we don't have trained workers to do them. So
I mean,
That's
Well,
a
the
yeah,
really
issue
Jen,
100% is that we
absolutely
would do,
right. So all
but
the big
wait, the
corporations
issue
like
isn't,
outsource.
well, the issue
Sorry.
isn't that we, no, just very quick. The issue isn't that we have outsourced and will continue to outsource. The issue is for those people who are born and or live in countries that are higher cost of living, therefore need higher wages. What are we going to do with those people who live in those countries who, for various reasons, are not suitable for the kind of employment that will be left behind? So, I mean, you could say, well, the companies have to, contribute significantly to whatever basic income, but then all they're going to do is relocate to other areas where the amount that they have to contribute is significantly lower. Like, we have to look at this as a global problem. What are we going to do with people who are not suitable for knowledge work? What happens to them?
but there's a
Alexandra,
lot
Can
of
it's
I
work
add
already
that's
another
not
happening.
going to
So it's,
transfer.
I have to go on record. It's already happening, right? So we have companies like the company I just came from. All of their HR is done in India now. Anything technical related done in India. And they have the people over in India working crazy hours so that they can answer the phone during our business day. It's already happening. It's just whether or not we want, when we
Yeah,
robotize or what have you, these standard operations like giving food or what have you, whether or not, or paying for your food, I should say, like a fast food, whether or not you want to keep it in America where someone's, standing or doing something, or whether or not it's going to be offshored, right? It's already happening. It's not whether or
No,
not we
Suzanne, we
can
said that.
stop it.
We already brought those up. There's other examples. I mean, if you look at like Squaw Valley Ski Resort, years and years ago, instead of hiring American kids, they started bringing in people from South America because it's their off, the reverse season. And the deal is they still have to pay the minimum wage, which is all that they pay, but those people will do a lot more. So people, all different corporations are doing this, as you're saying. And the additional 2 points I'll make are, Alexandra, is that when they're not paying employees here, those taxes, again, it's a win-win for the company because they're not paying those taxes that would benefit the area, the employment taxes, et cetera. And as you said, then the people here aren't spending the money. But also, if you're just entering a labor force or just looking at it and those jobs don't exist, I mean, you would take that into consideration and have to do something else. I mean, we
But
can't, I would say you don't look at it from I'm not going to look at it from my world because the world's changing. So what do you do? What's not being outsourced?
no, see, this is the question. No, there is, just to clarify again, there is no question this has been happening for a long time and is continuing. And political candidates use this to their advantage by saying it's immigrants, it's not immigrants. But this has been happening for a long time. Totally acknowledge it is there. The problem is we can give a million examples of how it's happening, who it's doing, whatever, but we're still not talking about what do we do with the people who are not suitable for knowledge work. It used to be that the average intelligence of a human was enough to basically function in any role in that particular society. But the level of information growth over the last 50 years has basically made it so that the average intelligence is not smart enough to be able to aggregate and use the information that they have to in order to conduct business at this level. Like, so as you move towards a knowledge society, that is, or a knowledge based economy, right? That is it's a higher bar than our evolution has created. So there are a lot of people who are not yet, able to, the average person is not really able to get a position, a long-term position that supports them in a knowledge-based economy. So the question is, and these people are going to exist for at least the next, couple hundred years until we figure out, what to do next, right? But what do we do with these people? They're going to exist. There's going to be more and more of them. They're going to be angry because, and they already are, because they can't feed their families and they don't have jobs. And it's because those jobs have been made non-existent by automation and by outsourcing, but those people still live. So we can't just say, oh, well, I guess you're on your own on the street. Sorry, there's no more jobs for you, and your skill set isn't needed anymore, right? What is our obligation to these
What?
people,
How
right?
about Alexandra? How
This is
about re-education and upskilling? I mean, they can improve
It
themselves,
doesn't
right? So
work.
that they could come. It
It
works. I
doesn't
No,
mean,
work.
look
no,
at
It
Singapore's
doesn't.
model. Look at Singapore's
hang on.
model.
There is
Can
another
I?
first off.
problem.
There's two things. I'm going to jump in. So we've got a welfare system. You know that, Alexandra, and what are you saying? What are we seeing? We're seeing that the welfare system is getting more and more applicants. Right? There's more and more homelessness in the United States, etc. But I do want to say, like, my husband came from. His family was not educated. His parents were not educated. He grew up in Mendocino in the sticks, is what we call it. Yet both of their children went on to be very successful business people, went on to be each generation to go to college, first generation to go to med school and get a master's. I mean, so I think what we're failing to look at is there are a lot of people that, although they came over as immigrants, because guess what? America's a melting pot, guys. We are all immigrants, whether we want to acknowledge it or not. We are all either first generation, second generation, third generation, fourth generation, like I am, right? But we're all a bunch of immigrants to America. We're a melting pot, unless you're Native American, and I am not. So
I'm
I
not
think
sure.
what we have to recognize is that there's going to be adjustments, and there's going to be a lot more people coming into what we call the system, getting welfare, etc. But we have to make accommodations, and we've had to make accommodations in every with every wave, with every century that's gone by, and with the changes, you have to make adjustments.
I'd like to add another level to this discussion, please, if I may. Just to say that a lot of people that I've met who have been employed in so-called low-paid jobs, low-skill jobs, are actually highly qualified, often with a couple of degrees under their belt, often with experience in their home countries in fields that are, dare I say, superior to the checkout job that they might be having. So there is a level of opportunity and employment, availability of jobs, what kind of things people do to survive. And it's such a complex thing that is facing our world, because migration out of necessity, out of escaping from violence or abuse or something like that, makes up just part of the picture. There is so much more, like those things we were talking earlier about microbiomes and so on. Our whole lives are very complex. Nature is complex. And these are big issues that we've got to deal with. But as someone said earlier on, we've not even started to tackle them. I don't think it's about people with lower intellectual capacities at all, because, people have lots of different skills, lots of different talents. And we've got to take that into account too, don't we?
Can I? I'll hold off, but I'd like to chime in at some point.
Well
I
said,
may. Or,
Susie.
if I can offer the following idea, which is it's the underlying form of capitalism that's been popularized by Reaganism as it took over the U.S. and has kind of gone everywhere, and fueled by globalization. As the son of a union guy, one of the biggest developments on this point has been what Amazon's doing. And I'm saying that because our trades, the trade, like electricians and a whole bunch of jobs that were well paying jobs, they've been outsourced. What they've delivered, what they produced has been outsourced basically to China, right? Into the Asian tigers. And it's been evolving, but there is a pendulum swinging back. The question is, how will that pendulum swing back? There's a decoupling that's being catalyzed by conflict and by all these other privacy and other kind of concerns. But the means of and the need to do more regional regenerative production is real. It is not like this little, just for startups or just people fantasizing it. This is a real need for us to really transition to having a world where we have some level of financial, personal, and family and community financial. What did Yellen call it? Resilience, economic resilience. You're going to hear a lot more of that whole idea, because as the climate fractures and food, we have food issues, all these things. We need resilience. We need to be able to hop forward to and land without having everything crater. So I think the trades are really something that need to get revitalized, and ESG metrics need to have teeth. So for ESG metrics to have teeth, we need a functional Washington D.C. here in the States, at least. The U.K. is doing some really interesting things about getting some real teeth legislatively against greenwashing and things like that. And they seem to lead in so many different areas. But we need to fix the issue with regards to people voting for their personal interests versus based on what they see on TV, which is just manipulation. But in any case, I'll close on that, which is we need an ESG with some teeth to start to lay some of the groundwork and some decision making for rational middle management and executive management decision making.
Yeah, but okay, so I'll jump in on that, David. So great points. Two, couple of them. One, yeah, I'm going to push back, Alexander, a little bit on the education or the intellect level, because I think it's actually a bigger factor of access to education. You may have to be working two jobs. You don't have access to the same schools. You don't have good food at home. You don't have parents, or you do, but I don't think it's just an intellect issue. I know plenty of people that are average. Average is average by definition. There's plenty, half our society is below average and they function. David, the trades, yeah, those guys actually, just based on my N of one here in my Northern California area, it's, they pay very well because they can't get people. And so they pay, and one of the bigger companies here that is electricians and plumbing, they pay, they train, and they give them, a lot. So that these, they were telling me the wages, and it's actually quite high for the work, allegedly for the work they're doing, but that's what they demand, and that's what they're getting. And so that is coming back, because that's something that can't be, the actual hands-on in the home, like going to people's homes, that type of manual work hasn't been outsourced and probably won't be. That's something that they're predicting will not get automated quickly because it's so unique. And then ESG, I mean, again, if you're going to ask, I just have a bend here, obviously, but if we're going to ask our politicians to do anything, I mean, they're in the pockets of everyone that's paying them. So, and it's complex and it's not, but we're definitely not paying the true price for what we're consuming. So, yeah, good point.
So the for the ESG thing, that is actually something that the SEC is starting to prosecute on. So there, for public companies, there are actually teeth now that are happening with, because that was the big issue this year, was making sure that people are actually doing what they say they're going to be doing, and then also complying with what they have said that they've done. So there's a big case that just happened, actually a huge one, that just prosecuted solely on that issue. Is pretty incredible. But the heart of the question here, and this is not just in the U.S. In the U.S., we can actually pinpoint exactly when problems really started, and a lot of it was, for example, the issue with like this is, we can go to the actual, like the year in 81 when wages basically were decoupled from overall productivity of a worker, and there was a limitation in how much the highest paid workers versus average workers could pay. That ended, and minimum wage hasn't raised significantly since then. I brought up this point before, but we have other issues that have happened, like that was the union busting, et cetera, right to work states, all of that basically reduce the right of workers relative to the right of employers, right? And this is, and then the freedom of employers to choose their own jurisdictions, to choose best tax preferences, to have states fight over how little tax they need to pay. All of this, and I'm not anti-capitalist, right? I just think that we can have no ceiling, but we should still have a floor below which, no one should fall. And what I wonder, right, especially considering how many countries other than Germany have intermingled obligations in their fiat that also require their monetary policy to have an element of employment in it. I wonder what our obligation as the state, right? What every state's not our states, like nation states, right? What the obligation is to the people to provide them with the ability to survive, right? And it's part of it is certainly the issue with educational access is not even. We have, No Child Left Behind. One of the big legacies of that is too many people entering college, but they dropped out. They dropped the VOTEC, educational component where people were learning about vocation, like all of the trades and things like that. So, and this is just U.S. stuff, but these are, you can see these are the results of all of these past decisions, and they've basically created a powerless worker class that is a huge percentage of the U.S. population and an extraordinarily powerful employer class. And that employer class has what we look at as no obligations to either the state or to the population that represents its employees. And this is a huge change from, the past up through around 1980. There was an obligation. So what I am wondering, and we don't have to go into this more, but what I wonder is, do we need to have something in place? Because do we owe to our citizenry the right to live? And this is really what we're restricting, because right now we only have two doors to accessing capital on any real level. One is employment, right? Where an employer says, yes, you could be a cog in my machine, you fit in, and then as soon as you no longer fit in or have other requirements or whatever, you are evicted. And the other is banks, but banks have a lot of requirements in who they accept as worthy of giving money to, and the people who take the money don't know how to turn it into more money. So we really have this issue where many people in society do not have any access to capital, but we criticize them for finding illegal routes to capital because they have to survive. So I mean, this is just a long-term discussion. I certainly don't have an answer to it, but this is something that we need to consider: is what is our role? Do we have the obligation as employers or as citizens or as elected officials? Do we have the obligation to provide the right of survival, some sort of capital so that people can survive, or a capitalist, not a capitalist, capital less system where people who are willing to work or who cannot work or people who just exist have access to the goods and services they need and the dignity that they're accorded in order to survive. Like their fault in not being and this is not necessarily saying that there's intellect is basically just an average term, but generally speaking, you have to have a certain level of intellect in order to function well in a knowledge-based economy. And it is not to say that people don't want to try or they don't want to re-educate or things like that, but sometimes it isn't possible. Like the jobs that are available are they're not enough jobs for the people who want them, and of the jobs that are available, some of the jobs that are available are not, they don't have the skill set or the means to acquire that skill set. So do they have the right to be? And I think that they do. I think that we have an obligation to the people who exist simply because they exist, that you are allowed to find a way to survive on your own, or without being a dependent of anyone, or without losing your dignity, or without going to jail because you are begging for money. Like there has to be something. If we're going to allow companies the ability to be wherever they want, subject themselves to whatever regulations or lack thereof they want, and not employ people in order to maximize profits for a few, we have to compensate for the freedom that we've accorded them with the rest of the population. And then I'm done. I'm not going to add more on that. I'm sorry. And I thank you for all for your indulgence on this discussion.
And Alexandra, I
Alexandra,
would
there is.
love to chime in very briefly on this. You talk about obligation, and that's great. But if you look at world history, you'll see one simple fact, that if
the system, the society don't follow the obligation to give every level of humans in the system a right to make progress in their own life, a hope for creating a better future, then you get social unrest. It's simple as that. So if the divide between the rich and the poor gets too big, then you will have social unrest. So we can talk about obligation, or we can talk about that we are making a huge problem ahead of us, or ahead of us, I'm not quite sure. Maybe we already have it. But let's discuss that. Thank you. Susie from Denmark.
So, Alexandra, in the middle of what you said, Alexandra, and a lot of people seem to say this, that there's two ways. You either get a job or you go to a bank to get money to start a business. I don't, okay, I should caveat, I come from a very privileged background, but I have ended up with no money several times. I've had 14 businesses. The last 4 or 5 of them have been pretty successful, and none of them have started with any capital. The first, apart from crowdfunding in one example, I think the place you go for your first bit of money is you create something and you sell it to somebody. And I think there's still a lot of room for that. There's still a lot of room for people to create something. So some things take millions of dollars to create the first one off, sure, different type of business, but there's still a lot of things that don't. And you can sell things before you even make them. You can sell an idea before, and it doesn't have to be a pitch to a bank. It can be a pitch to your customers. So I don't think that there's only two options. I think the third option is that we move from the information age to the creator age, and the creators create shit and sell it, and they either sell it before or after. They either make it before or after they sell it. That doesn't matter. It depends on the product and the market, but that is another possibility, and I've done it multiple times.
I wouldn't
And the
want to
situation.
anchor. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, David, you go first.
I don't to have a really. So I propose this, which is I appreciate the journey of the entrepreneur, obviously, but I'm also concerned about having the conversation anchored on the symptoms. And let me just try to recast it as what are the problems, and it's the Milton Friedman broke the American dream. Okay, when he said that the primary role of corporations is for the shareholder, or exclusive function is to optimize for the shareholder, that opened the gates to take what was a struggling, but that's reality, multi-stakeholder form of democracy that gave birth to the middle class, that gave birth to the American dream, which was the dream of humanity, which is to have upward mobility of the middle class, to create the middle class. That is what all other countries in the world aspired and were jealous of, quite frankly. Okay, so that's the problem. A lot of the ways to address these different stakeholders is by getting everybody to the table. Now, Alexandra, man, talk about symptoms, right? The problem is banking regulation, and what lots of people of color, being one, the challenge is not just people of color. Let me just restate that is the predatory banking practices that are allowed to fucking happen, right? Access to capital is one thing, but when people are getting, I don't want to say that word, when they are getting reamed, that's a softer word, with regards to just using credit and things like that. So I would kind of separate them because that is a whole. Just like how there's going to be a welcome to reality with the fossil fuel executives and fossil fuel industry, there needs to be another one in banking. And so, but that is going to be distinct from the multi-stakeholder form of democracy that if it doesn't emerge soon, we're going to get the kind of unrest in the streets, I suspect that quite frankly needs to come. If hopefully we won't get to that, but if it needs to come, it's going to have to come. Thanks. I'm David. I'm done speaking.
Thank you, David. Now, can I chip in here, please, everyone? I think what you're saying is right, David, but I think it actually involves every last one of us because we are part of the society. And in a way, our leaders are supposed to lead. We've elected the system of society, how we function, in that we have governments, we have authorities, we have leaders. And actually, the stakeholders you're talking about,
The stakeholders are every single one of us. The trouble is the system has evolved in such a way that there is that hierarchy. Now, if you go back to the problem, whether it's Milton Friedman or whoever, we have made these choices all along the way from generations back, and we are where we are today because we've got issues with those situations. The fact that other countries, Philippines, India, wherever, do our outsourced jobs for us on the telephone, that was probably a part of this grand idea of globalization. And so much has happened that we're now turning back on because we think, oh dear, that's been a problem. It's created other difficulties. Well, perhaps we should have thought of them, or perhaps we're not looking deep enough to find out how globalization can actually help us. But I wanted to go back to this whole thing that it's such a complex problem, and we really need to sit down and figure it out properly so we can get all those stakeholders at the table. Now, can we get 9 billion people, 8 billion people around the table? Of course not, but we've got to think about how we can make it inclusive. So my point about education, you know how plumbers and electricians today in 2022 get paid a phenomenal amount of money because during COVID, their jobs were very much in demand and so on and so forth, and even before COVID. So tradespeople get paid a lot now. Tragedy is, certainly I find that I don't know that their skills are at the level that they're getting paid for, because tradespeople need to have apprentices or junior workers who come up the ranks and carry the trade on, right? So those apprentices, certainly in the UK, have been failed for the last decades because that system in 1997, when Tony Blair and the Labour Party came into power here in the UK, they traded very much on, forgive the use of that word there, education, education, education. And suddenly the different system of education back there, where you had technical colleges and so on, all became geared towards universities, and everybody wanted to go to university. So we had a lot of different university courses and people and young people going towards those things and leaving the trades behind. So there was a great gap in the skills and labor sector, which then need to be, and on it goes. It's like we, the stakeholders, the citizens of this world, we fall into line with the market mentality, the social mentality, the hierarchical mentality, and we allow these things to happen because we genuinely believe that they probably know what's best, they probably guide us, but sadly, the policies that have happened in the last decades have not really helped us. The trickle down never trickled down, trickled up. Well, no, it gushed up, and mostly the people at the top got all that money. So how do we solve this problem? It is so complicated. It's exactly what it's meant to be because we are part of nature, and we've just got to figure out how the hell we're going to work that out and evolve with all this technology around us to something that's workable for all. Thank you. This is Pat. I'm in Scotland, and I'm done. So a quick thought is one of the root causes of people not just doing their own thing when I speak to them is fear. So we have dumb stupidity, as in trainable stupidity, as in people don't know stuff, but they could if they studied, through their life, and fear, false expectations of being real, the idea that you need money in the bank, the idea you don't have a big enough nest egg, the idea you can't give up your income, whatever. So if stupidity and fear are part of the problem, as evocative and rude as stupidity sounds, it's chosen that word for a reason, then intelligence and courage are two attributes that I think can get us through this. You take the example of a tradesperson. A tradesperson, you don't need a tradesperson if you have intelligence and courage. You just do the shit yourself. There's nothing a tradesperson that's been trading for 20 years can do that I won't pick up and do immediately. Nothing. And I do it on a daily basis because I'm smart enough and brave enough to do it. But I don't think that I was born that smart. Maybe a little bit, not even more than average, but I've spent 45 years learning, didn't stop learning when I left school, luckily. And I am courageous. I was born like that. So I think if we can train intelligence, if that's possible, or at least the ability to pick up new skills, and train courage, which I'm not sure where you start, then I think people with those attributes can go a long way regardless of how the world changes. But yeah, and the way we do that is we unschool our kids. We don't give them a curriculum, and they have courage and adaptability in spades. So just some thoughts.
We
Yeah, I think
make sure they're
historically
not afraid of asking questions.
we've just been really bad at retraining. I know I spoke to a few folks from IBM a few years ago, and they said that, you know, IBM used to retrain people. They used to have programs, and they actually got into a little bit of trouble because of that. But Peter Thiel showed that, hey, look, if kids are self-motivated and so on, then they don't even need college. You just give them money and you give them some guidance. And yeah, I agree with that, but that speaks to a minority of people. The majority of people, something like 70 to 80% of people, engage in rent-seeking jobs, jobs that in no way add to the innovation or information economy. So I don't know how you deal with that transition, because the previous industrial revolution was about automation. This one is more about algorithms and basically removing people altogether. So that is very concerning. And how you motivate older people, yeah, the fear, I think that's a huge factor. But I also think that the time that you need to take away, time kind of works differently when you're younger and you're 20s or whatever than it does later on in life. Life tends to get busy, and to do education well, it doesn't help to always be worried about rent. Some studies show that 10 to 20 IQ points, you incur a loss of that much just for always being concerned about being poor. So the minimum guaranteed income that Alexandra mentioned is what I would call it. I think that's also an important thing. But to align the two so that a lot of people don't stay at home, play video games, and smoke weed, and that's all they do, that's also a very real problem. So here in Canada, they had a trial, I think in Manitoba, where they just had people write essays and say, hey, why do you need money? What are you using it for? And that was actually a very successful program. But the politics of it is that people don't like giving other people money for free if they're not working. So bats have the same thing. If bats don't get enough food on their own, they can leech off of their friends. They can quite literally suck the blood. But if they do that too many times, they get banished by the community because they're seen as slackers. So slacking is something that we have, as a species, a big problem.
I want to add
I just
to Eric's point, which is uh, the Alexandra's question about what to do with people who haven't joined the knowledge economy. I'm not sure it's the. I think I understand her question, but I think even within her question, there's a recontextualization that might help reveal the answer, which is that we're at a moment in 2022 where even people in the knowledge economy are being replaced because the knowledge economy, the tip of that pyramid, is getting ever more specialized to the nth degree because it's growing asymptotically or hyperbolically, such that we've now reached a new stage where even the knowledge workers are becoming replaced. Whereas Eric was saying in the Industrial Revolution, you had the agrarian society was being replaced, and we've utterly commoditized the agrarian uh, economy. Like it became so commoditized that it became pointless for anyone to be a farmer anymore. And then we go into the post industrial revolution knowledge economy, and now we're going to automate that. And that's where it gets concerning, because farmers or agrarian society types, of which the world still has a lot, by the way, like half, by the way, they're fine. You don't need to worry about them. In fact, what we need to worry about are the people who are in the knowledge economy who are caught in the middle because they can't reach the top of the pyramid of the next stage of the highly specialized knowledge economy, and nor can they participate in the agrarian economy. So they're caught in the middle because they aren't specialized enough to continue up the pyramid, nor are they, to use Ben's words, maybe courageous enough to de-skill themselves to learn how to grow fucking potatoes. That's the real problem. Because if they could go back to where we are in Southeast Asia and learn how to grow their own food again, they would be fine. The problem is they can't bring themselves to do that. That's the problem. And what we're going to do with them, to use your own language, is force them to go back out of the knowledge economy because they can't go to the top of the pyramid. They need to run the fuck back down the pyramid.
yeah.
The
I think we have a
term
choice, Tyler.
technology.
Sorry,
Go ahead, Ben.
you go ahead, buddy. I think my reception's a bit shit. Go ahead.
What's that? What'd you say? Just kidding. Now we can hear it clearly.
Yeah.
But I'll take the mic. Technology, by definition, is a tool. When cave people created fires, the stone wheel. So we're at a point where the technology has enough smarts. This whole cyber smartitude, the ML, this automation that was born a few decades ago, or maybe a little longer. We're now at a part. We're at a point where we're talking about radiologists. We're talking about every single career, every single thing that a human does over the next fistful of years is going to be doable at least the performance of a human. But we are not. We're at the crux of how
Except
do we
plumbing.
how do we
Except
how
plumbing.
do we deal how do we deal with this behemoth, this thing.
I
So
think
the very fundamental question with regards to what you threw me off my point. Sorry, I'll remember it in a moment. I only had like one cup of coffee. Sorry about that, but I had a good point in there. It was coming.
Well, I would love to chime in from Denmark. Young people today, those 18, 20, 22, they're discussing, so what should I study at university? And then they start thinking and checking things out, and they say, well, if I want to make money, I had to become a builder, a carpenter, anything where you actually use your hands instead of your head. Isn't that interesting? Change is already here.
That's
seriously, I've got a little, and sorry, very briefly, a critical thinking tool I've shared before, which is to drop the first word, especially if it's what or why or where, particularly what and why. If you just try dropping the word when you ask the question, so what should I study at university becomes should I study at university, and so forth. Just a quick thought, because there's so many, as Tyler just mentioned, presumptions built into the question. I also, on a separate point, David, I hope it wasn't me who threw you off. I've got slightly bad reception here. If it was, I'm very sorry. My other thought was, I think we're at a junction where we get to choose what the next era is. I don't think the next era is written into history yet. So we know that the information era has happened. I think there's a choice between like the AI era, where we kind of don't exist anymore, and the creator era, where it's a world full of humans creating things for other humans that are aesthetically, environmentally, and in every other way appealing to other humans, and let the machines do as much as we want them to do for us. I do think we have a choice in the way we operate. But anyway, Amen.
Okay, I got
also, there's sorry, Tyler. Is it okay? One more quick thought
sure,
based on something you said.
sure.
So one more quick thought is I think we have lost traction. So if you see, you put a racing driver in a very low power car and an idiot in a very power, and your challenge is you get from A to B, go quarter of a mile on ice. Okay, a racing driver in a mini and a baboon in a Lamborghini. The racing driver in the mini is going to win because he's going to have traction in the whole time. He's not going to spin his wheels. And I think on a very meta level, we're spinning our wheels of what you're saying, Tyler. And I very much realize this myself. Is that on one level, I'm kind of on the false, not real level. I'm working on if Maslow's needs means anything, I'm kind of working on the self actualization. I've done all the rest. On a real level, I've got fuck all. I've got no energy. I've got no water. I've got no power. There's a whole nother ladder to climb that is the real ladder, the maintaining traction with reality ladder. That's really humbling. And I kind of like a rebirth to start again and say, you know what? If I can't feed water and energize myself, then nothing else matters. The Russians drop a chemical bomb, we got no air. You got a few minutes then. So let's not from a place of fear, but from a place of opportunity about reconnecting with nature and understanding. I think there's an opportunity to get traction with what is, get independent, and get a much deep sense of interdependence later down the line when each individual actually understands what it takes to properly contribute to this little blue rock we're going around the sun on, and not just stand there with your hand out expecting other people to do everything for you. To find the one thing that you can do, one or two things that you can do really well, and do it for you and for everybody else around you. Just a thought,
So
a bit
here's,
idealistic.
honest to God, in no particular order, although it'll seem, as the universe is magical, that these were in some way organized. I swear to you they were not. So the next link was from Thomas Tong about the Japanese railway company now plans to use a giant humanoid robot for fixing power lines because they don't get shocked, giant robots that can do some heavy lifting while de-risking human lives are a great way for technology to move ahead. So keep that in mind in relation to the
Well, it's kind of bullshit. That's kind of the whole point, like you're saying that, like it's miraculous how that text or that was the next tweet. That's kind of that's where what problem are you trying to solve? That's the small tiny percentage of health real cases that occur per year, or taking a job role that fed, hundreds or even thousands of families, and trying to replace that with some kind of, whether it's automation or a robot or this or that, right? I
Yeah.
mean, part of the solution is they got to tax that shit. They got to you still have another real thing, and that's a problem. That's the challenge. But, transparency of full costing of all these economic activities. I mean, there's a tax base that goes away when a company can just eliminate entire classes of employees, entire roles in their company. So the municipal jurisdictions that operate, they have to have some kind of a say about that because there's other implications to that.
Right. Keep
In
in mind.
Robot
Japan
tax.
context, automation and robotics are used to tackle the aging population issue.
Right. But also keep in
Especially
mind
the
that
dangerous type of job.
Elon Musk, this guy that you might have heard of, is on the books as saying that the Tesla humanoid robot will likely be a much more profound page in his obituary than even Tesla the cars or SpaceX the rockets. Because when you think about how fast, and so from his perspective, that robots are about to, in the combination, and it's really perhaps even more about the intelligence of the robots combined with the physicality of them, that the AIs that we're building are now about to assume physical forms, right? So they can take physical actions in the physical world, not just in the cyber digital world, right? And when that concrescence happens, and he believes it's about to happen, oh boy, does he believe it's about to happen, that the world will change in ways that are very difficult to contemplate. However, I think one way that we can correctly assume is that the knowledge worker, of which I would call a electrician, kind of straddles the fence between a laborer and a knowledge worker, and especially in a electrical engineer, certainly would fall more squarely in the knowledge working side of that equation. And those are, and nearly every knowledge worker role that we can think of, which, by the way, on the human timescale of 200,000 years, the agrarian society was 10,000 years ago. The knowledge economy, we're talking, was relatively yesterday. And the point is that rate of progress is so pronounced that they themselves, including venture capitalists, are soon to find themselves replaced by algorithms and robots, such that to me, perhaps I'm equally concerned about what are we going to do about these knowledge workers who can't grow their own food or take care of themselves. I'm not as worried about the pre-knowledge work folks who are able to use and still have the skills of farming and fishing and all of that. And it's not to say that people shouldn't be able to relearn those skills, although I've been very keenly watching that and going, that's been my own personal lived experience for the last 6 years living on a remote island, is reskilling myself in those ways. I know Ben is in the process of reskilling himself because I hear him express thoughts that I've said to myself that only occurred to you once you begin the process. The problem is it doesn't happen overnight, because that's why I constantly refer to the domestication of humanity. I think the one, my pejorative term for knowledge workers is domesticated cats. And how will they rewild themselves? And it's going to take a little bit of time. But to me, that's the more interesting question, not to belittle the main question, which is, what are we going to do about people that are not even part of the knowledge economy? But I think I'm more interested in the question of what are we going to do about the people who were part of the knowledge economy, who aren't going to be able to keep up because the humans aren't able to evolve at the rate of progress that the technology is evolving.
What's the term for the people who, like Musk and he champions, where technology solves all the problems? That is the problem.
The
Elon Musk,
singularity.
y'all. Yeah, so Elon Musk is kind of full of shit in so many different ways, and that's his vision. Here we go again, with people like that. His vision, that just like you said very articulately, Tyler, was that those are good. That's going to be a disruption to how we live. It will if we continue on our current path of this very limited idea that technology is going to solve the problem. We need to fully cost the technology. In technology commercialization, there's a concept of TCO, total cost of ownership. And all we've ever done is had the IT cost. But there is a much larger cost, the total cost of ownership of automation. I don't know, there's probably a new term where we need to reflect the cost to how we are collectively living. How does it affect the jobs? How does it affect the planet? I mean, there's a whole new, acronym there that needs to be birthed so that naive, quite frankly, and I used to drink that shit all the time way back a few decades, right? Technology is going to solve everything, but it doesn't. It creates a lot of problems as well. So I just wanted to share that thought.
Here we go.
Sorry.
I
But
think famously,
watch how all of them, not all, but in some sense, the next 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 or so tweets that I've cherry picked out from the ones that everyone kindly sent in some way tangentially touch on this conversation point. The next one's from Jeff G via TechCrunch. It says back pain? Question mark. This app uses your webcam to detect bad posture and addresses that. Are you slouching at your desk again? There's an app for that. Zen is the name of the app. It uses posture mirroring software to help information workers stop hunching over at their desks. So we're delegating common sense to apps.
it's
If
like
you've
that
lost
famous
traction,
photo. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, if you lost traction with reality to the point you need an app to tell you how to sit, then your body's in one place and your brain's in the other. That's the problem.
Watch the next.
That's a very precise analyzing of a general problem in our society. Thank you very much.
We've reached
It's like that famous.
a critical tipping point of peak common sense. Researchers have identified a specific neural circuit and neuropeptide responsible for relaying the sensation of pleasant touch from the skin to the brain. Can you imagine how Apple might use that innovation? So, the point is, researchers have identified a specific neural circuit responsible for the pleasant sense of touch, where that is in the brain. And that's why have they found that? That's because that's one of the biggest evolutions that awaits us in the very not so distant future, which is mapping our brains so that we can digitize our fucking noodles, so that we can digitize our actual brains. That's why every week we read a headline about some other part of the brain and the neural pathways responsible for sight or smell or touch or this or the elation or depression, because, make no mistake, some dude named Mark Zuckerberg and the shareholders of Apple and Amazon and everybody else understand how insanely lucrative and inevitable and powerful we've digitized everything around us. Our brains are the last things left to be digitized. And we're going to digitize it. Oh boy, are we going to digitize it. So that we can sit in a pool of semi-salt solution so that we can float endlessly and sense that the VR metaverse will accurately reproduce everything that we sense. As soon as you can tap into the vision processing of the brain and smell of the brain and now the touch of the brain, what's the difference between experiencing the touch in the metaverse and in non-metaverse based reality? The point is,
Manufactured peptides. So I
go
think
back,
that could become like an aerosol.
go
Yeah.
watch, go watch The Matrix again, and enjoy it with the knowledge that there's an incredible amount of effort being spent on mapping the parts of the brain so that we can rather seemingly enter some sort of metaverse matrix where your wildest fantasies will merge with your reality. So the next is that from Bibi, from Nikkei Japan, that India's Prime Minister Modi vows to build a semiconductor production hub. The government is offering $10 billion in incentives to attract global chip makers, as they do rush to join the knowledge economy. No doubt, India is eager to move up the pyramid rather expeditiously, and that article clearly highlights that. The next one is a great demonstration of how specialized and how the tip of the spear of the progress that's happening, which is far beyond the comprehensions of even experts in most fields. It's from Gizmodo, from Jeff G. A 2-inch diamond disc that can hold a staggering billion Blu-rays worth of information and data. Quantum memory promises to be just as mind-meltingly amazing as quantum computers because it can store billions of times more data in quantum memory than in traditional memory systems like DRAM that we're using today. So what happens when we have a billion-fold increase in memory storage, which ostensibly is on the horizon?
Yeah, usually storage grows by a factor of 10, I think. So this is quite the increase.
Next is, and what that does to the cost of storage of memory as well, it drives it down to nothing. It's the ubiquitization. This is what we've been doing since the cave drawings, is we continue to make progress on something until it becomes commoditized down to essentially zero, which is what we did in the industrial revolution. Was all about making the cost of labor drive down to near zero for most incredibly laborious tasks. And we're going to do the same for the knowledge work. Make no mistake about that. The knowledge work will become worthless, utterly worthless. What are we going to do with those people when their $100,000 liberal arts education becomes literally worthless? Well, they're going to need to be downscale, not upscale, to become rewild themselves so they don't starve themselves to death. For maybe there's an app that can show them, the app that shows them that their posture's out of whack can also inform them that they're hungry enough that they need to learn to fucking pick an apple off a tree. So the New York Times article from Dr. Fran says that the extreme heat that's pummeling India and Pakistan is about to get a lot worse. The Indian subcontinent has recorded above average temperatures for weeks. Heat-related weather watches or alerts are now in effect for hundreds of millions of people. And let me spell this one out for you. They're going to run out of water. As if Vinay is still on the stage, can verify for you, or Monica, or any of our friends on the continent, or Karam, who's in Pakistan. But our friends on the subcontinent, it's a little secret that they need to start being a lot more vocal about. The billion of people in India and the 400-ish million people in Pakistan are on the brink of running out of this thing called dihydroxygen oxide. What is it? It's water. They're going to run out of water.
Dihydrogen oxide. Yeah, terrible chemical that someone's got us all addicted to.
Well, they're running out of that in this little town called India that you might have heard of. It's just a few people. It's like a bus stop. But this heat that they're experiencing and the water water levels in the water tables are beyond critically low, and there's no clear solution on the horizon. There's several potential solutions. Let's pray to God we hit them. But I think to effectively hit them, we're going to need to get through cold fusion to create enough energy to do the desalination at the scale that we're going to need for India and Pakistan. So what happens? But yet but where's the focus is on the semiconductors, as we just read 3 articles ago, that Prime Minister Modi's putting out 10 billion not for how to solve this water crisis due to this heat crisis. It's the how do we upscale into becoming knowledge workers in semiconductors, which, by the way, hires relatively incredibly small numbers of people, by the way. So the next is from Jeff G. About this guy, this Elon Musky dude is in the news a lot, but CNN says this Mr. Musky wants to authenticate all real humans on Twitter as the public combs through Musk's Twitter feed for clues on how the billionaire entrepreneur intends to run the social media platform he's buying and why precisely he wants to identify everybody on there. It's such a difficult puzzle, that one. Why would he want to identify everybody on a social network? The next is that
Tyler, I
PayPal.
can't help but observe that what you talked about, we talked about earlier about being stuck between like the dream of the commercial success and the reality of that you actually can't feed yourself. Um, that's happening to India at a country scale. It's
Correct.
the
That's the
same
point I'm
thing.
trying to make. They're literally 10 years behind where the U.S. now finds itself, where you've got all of these people that are in student debt, and their education. The progress of the innovation has gone far faster than they ever could as humans through their liberal arts education. So they've now found themselves caught in the middle, where their knowledge is not applicable to the knowledge economy that as in the same way that they dreamed that it would be. And they're not able to buy a house, and they're still living in mom's basement. And now what? No, that's who I'm more worried about, because they feel entitled. The farmers in Southeast Asia don't suffer from this. And by the way, Cheryl recently had and still has at the top of the room the Guardian article titled "Most Political Unrest Has One Root Cause: Soaring Inequality." Well, that's true in the West, certainly true in the U.S. This bizarre obsession with your neighbor having this sense of inequality is a bizarre somewhat new facet to societies, where people driving around in Japanese budget automobiles are jealous of people driving around in German automobiles for some reason. So
Oh no, they don't. This article is contributed by Susie. I'm just bringing it
by
up.
Susie. Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
My point is that it was perfect that it is, because I feel like Denmark more than anywhere has figured out the solution to this problem, which is they put very high taxes on the very high earning people and keep people in a rather narrow range of incomes, remarkably so. And it's led to, from experience, Sarah can chime in, being a Swede, which is not so dissimilar from how the Danes are doing it. But the Danes have a pretty freaking good system going as it is, with how they balance. They aren't really suffering from this soaring unrest due to inequality. Although, I mean, we, in all fairness, Sarah, I don't know. Do we need to mention the recent rumbling? Well, no, that was Quran driven. We can leave that out. That isn't.
Oh,
Yeah, let's
don't
leave
mention
that for now.
Parmesan. Sorry. Danish export that I'm very, very embarrassed about. A Danish, very outspoken, racist, so-called politician with mental issues have found out that in Denmark only, well, let me put it this way: 50 people turn up at his demonstrations, and the 48 would be against him, and then there's him and one follower to hold his mic. But he's gone to Sweden and he's created havoc. I'm very sorry about that.
Yeah, no. What I'm talking about is like the unrest was not an economic issue, really. So I don't need to bring that up.
No,
But
no.
I'm glad to hear that you're still on stage. But Denmark should be watched closely on the issue of unrest or social inequality issues, because I really feel like Denmark, and I think Sarah would agree, perhaps more than anywhere, has aptly addressed this issue of how to deal with the economics of inequality are, for lack of a better word. Anyway, there's certainly something
Well,
to
I
be
would
learned from
love
Dennis.
to chime in with two facts. One of them is Financial Times analyzed, I think it was 47 wealthy, healthy nations in the world around January, and found out that Denmark was actually on top of the list in the country who came out the best financially after COVID. And I can tell you the numbers in Denmark is that we had a huge safety net under companies and individuals, workforce. We paid companies money to not fire people. So when the lockdown was over, they could just start
Resume.
up
Yeah.
running. And we have the lowest unemployment rate since the 80s. Things are flying financially. On the bad side, I will say that Denmark, as well as the rest of Europe, it's not only US who have had a growing inequality for 30 to 50 years. The same is the case in Europe. And
Yeah.
I have my theory about that is one of the reasons why we see a frustration from the poorer part of the population, especially that they do turn against people who look different and immigrants to a huge extent in Denmark. So that was a very quick find to the situation in Denmark currently.
Thank you, Susie.
This is a really important term, economic resilience, that Janet Yellen brought up is this week is a big deal, because exactly that, which is, we had such an impact with COVID, but it was an opportunity for us to start to really examine our socioeconomies, right? And so getting ready, and Janet speaks to this with regards to, hey, around the corner, not even around the corner, we're starting to feel, impacts of climate change, and it's going to have dramatic impact. COVID was training; it was just all training for a lot of this. So that's a great example. That country, Denmark, as well as a few others, I think. But economic resilience, like this whole idea of the inflation. Inflation is felt differently. There are studies that show that different segments of our population obviously get dealt a more of a challenge with this inflation than others. So just there's rising prices are good for people who are trying to feed their families, for example, and so this kind of, it has catalyzed that to a bit. But there are also some negative impacts with inflation. I don't mean to just say it's good at all, but just economic resilience is kind of the framing we need to start to have collectively when we're talking about these economic conversations and themes.
Okay. So
Our
Wall
very
Street.
capacity. Sorry, sorry, Tyler. Can I just contribute one last little thing?
Yeah.
Based on what David and Susie were saying earlier on, it seems that the way forward really is marked with not just about resilience, but our very capacity to actually engage with some of the difficulties we've been faced with. And whether it's climate change or the economy, based on the principles that we've used all these years, whether that is sustainable in the near future, how it's going to take us forward, agriculture, food, and all that sort of things, all these problems that are challenging us now, and of course inequality, which has not been resolved for all these decades, it's really going to head into a crisis position. And in that case, it really is about dealing with issues that are already arising. So, the whole immigration migration issue due to climate change or war or any of that, the fact that we still don't like each other because we look different is such an important variable in how we're going to adapt to the future or adapt to the world being a different place. I really don't know how we're going to face that one because, even in Denmark and here in the UK, we're wanting to send away people who have been displaced because of the war or because of climate change and other activities, to send them off to another country thousands of miles away, to let Rwanda, for instance, take on our problems. What is it about human beings that we just cannot, we find it so difficult. Let's be positive. We find it so difficult to tolerate each other. I don't like that word either. To accept each other. We all live on the one planet. We've got to look at it as a planet situation. We might have misused the word globalization, but we've got to look at it as one planet. This is where we live. Maybe we do have to travel to different countries to provide work, labor, our hands and our abilities. But then other people can come to our countries too. Doesn't that make life a bit more fair and shared?
And also great for the economy, proven over and over and over again.
Absolutely. Over and over again. And people are so blinkered, they don't want to look at it. I say people, certain people are so blinkered, they don't want to look at those statistics.
Right. It's because it's what's their felt experience, which to unpack to answer the kind of point that you raise, when, I mean, and people often ask, and somebody asked in this room recently if humans are in generally good natured or not. Like, are we generally altruistic or not? And I think the answer is in good times, when things are going well, when the economies are growing, I think generally humans are generous and altruistic. However, when things are on the decline, socially, economically, what have you, humanity turns rather selfish. And that's what we're seeing with Brexit and nationalism picking pace and fascism or what have you. And those things, and when you add in the climate change issue and the issues that resulted with COVID and everything else, there was a significant adding both of those together, and now with Ukraine and etc., that is going to has forced for many people this change, which is going to take a significant amount of time to play out. So I think we're going to start to see less of the better side of humanity, as much as we've seen it since the 50s, I think. It was never ideal. We were never our true potential angel selves, but more or less, we were witnessing the better side of humanity from the 50s until relatively recently. I think we're going to enter a new era where we're going to start to figure out just how dark our demons are. And there's no question one of the first ways that gets metabolized and manifested is the chastising of the others that you're referring to. That's just sort of one of the simplest and saddest aspects of humanity. Is we're going to start demonizing the others, and that's Brexit is part of that, and all of this decoupling is part of that, and it's sad, but I think we should understand it for what it is, because I think understanding it for what it is maybe one of the best strategies for hopefully overcoming it.
But
Power
Tyler,
is
in all your discussions here in this room and all your rants about technology and, say, for example, social media, the fact that we've been manipulated by people who are in a better position than most of us, manipulated to believe certain things, the whole misinformation, disinformation saga has just really ramped up. Yes, there's always been a level of misinformation and disinformation because of that concept of public relations and spin and all that sort of thing, which has really got out of control now. That largely how the media presents it in that very biased way, again because of power that David I think was trying to raise just then, and I will stop in 30 seconds. That is not on our side. We have got technology that can help us, because I do believe we are naturally very good in cases of crisis. Whenever there's a disaster somewhere, so many people in the UK dig into their own pockets and actually donate to these things, and it's wonderful. With Ukraine, so many people have offered to house people in their own homes and have not been taken up by the government here. Tragic. But in any case, the point is that I feel people are really good. I feel there is opportunity. We don't have to always see the other as evil or bad for us, but it's not helped when the media and other powers that be undermine that, or use that, manipulate that to their advantage. This pattern.
I'd just like to say, sorry, Tyler, I'm a little excited today. We've learned that life is a zero sum game. Life on the planet, so the resources and all of that. And what we need to do is cultivate, because it's all about the power. Because it's like herding cats, right? And just like you said, in good times, it's easier to cut off a piece of bread for someone else. In bad times, when you can't even feed yourself, let alone your family, it gets more challenging on on just anybody. But the laws, the law enforcement, but also the incentives to get the right behaviors, those need to we need to pay a lot more attention to all of that. And sadly, our political systems, at least here in the States, it's a disaster. It needs to get dramatically it needs to dramatically change to seize power from the lobbies and all the corporate profiteering that we've been speaking to.
Okay, the last article that I have here is from Jeff G. from New York Times. The headline says, "An unsteady moment for tech. The past decade has been one long party for tech. Where we go from here isn't so clear." And I think that's true of humanity generally. And more than one decade, I think it's been a few. We are at an odd moment for technology. Can you feel it? The powerful forces of unstoppable change and tech wealth are rolling along, but mixed in there is a shred of something else: doubt. Some of the digital age's titans, including Netflix and Facebook, are simultaneously ubiquitous, disruptive digital supernovas and tarnished stars careening into existential growth challenges, etc., etc. But I think it's, maybe I'm projecting, but I think she's picking up on a similar aspect of where things are going. There's a turning of the tide of sorts that I think we would be wise to be mindful of. And yeah, people said it during COVID. Oh, we got, but the combination of COVID and the economy and potential inflation and all the instability and whatever, and social media, and perhaps in some weird way, that's why Elon feels it's urgent that he buy Twitter at this stage, because it can be in a very important play an important role, which I think
Yeah, but Tyler, we tend to view technology differently as time goes on. I mean, wasn't Hershey's chocolate a tech company at one point? Refrigeration companies, tech companies, the food companies just be able to have food that could be, last a lot longer than they did 200 years ago. That was considered high tech at one time. So, I think our view of what a tech company is going to evolve as well.
sure.
I think you guys are making a big point, at least in the last night. I've been listening for a hot little minute. The sodium nitrates is the reason why we still have Debbie snacks. So it's a lot of other things. And when these tech companies actually go into the food market, that's where all the GMOs come from, because you have synthetic particles inside your body that cannot be broken down. And so it just creates a mass. And then your stem cells duplicate that mass because it can't be biodegradable. And that's the whole thing cancer is. And once we understand what cancer is, you can see all these different forms of cancer. But for a while, a lot of these people were telling us that cancer was genetic. But honestly, there hasn't been a spike in cancer cases or cancer coming out of nowhere like that until the industrial market came into food, now called food manufacturing. And so it's a very big thing. I mean, there's things where we call processed foods, and it was just a term that was thrown around, and we thought it was just packaged foods, not understanding that I think they had modified cobalt 63 and they made it cobalt 64. It's been a while since I read up on it, but that's essentially what processed foods is. They have like a cement like area, enclosed area in the middle of like a food factory, where they pass it through gamma radiation using cobalt 64, which shows like a sickle cell trait, and the FDA approved it, and it's like it hides in the food. And then years later, some you can get cancer. Some people don't. Some people do, because it depends on how many other things that you've eaten in that day that was considered processed, or how, and then the conglomeration of how many did you eat in that week, that the cells form together and it becomes too much for the body to process. And if your cells get damaged, if you get hurt or something like that, or certain tissues and stuff wants to get repaired in your body, then it creates the stem of the affected mutated cell, and those mutated cells then come together and create a mass. So I think it's a strong point talking about technology and real bioengineering and GMOs that started to get put in the foods when we started to industrialize our foods. It's a big thing that a lot of people don't look at.
Alrighty, there we go. We're gonna leave it there. We're Jesus, a 3 hour, 40-minute session. And happy Friday to everybody. Have a wonderful weekend. We'll see you again on Monday.